come through it though.
Come through.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, welcome. Welcome to the Environmental Implementation Committee meeting 8th of May 2024. Without any further ado, I will do the karakia. Tuia ki runga, tuia te raro, tuia te waho, tuia te rotu, tuia ki te here tangata, ka rongo te po, te rongo te o, o hui
Yeah.
Councillor Snyder, if you'd be kind enough to turn your mic on. Cool. Thank you.
Right, apologies. I think we have an apology for lateness from Councillor Andrew Noon. Is everybody else here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Yes. Public forum.
I'm happy to move. I'm happy to move the apology.
Okay, happy to move. Do we have a seconder for the apologies? Put that motion. Those for, aye, against, carried. Public forum. There is no public forum as far as I understand. Confirmation of the agenda. We've got a busy agenda. We've allowed between 9 and 12, 3 hours. Ideally, we have a morning tea in the middle if we can achieve that, unless there's any other agenda items. If not, declaration of interest. I will be standing aside for the section of this meeting under the Eco Fund, not because I necessarily have a conflict of interest, but I certainly have a connection with one of the applicants. So the appropriate thing will be for me to leave the room. Are there any other declaration of interest?
I also probably have a connection, but not to an applicant that's been successful. Does that count?
Sorry, you say it again, please.
Well, I'm a trustee of the Ely Penguin Trust who were an applicant but haven't been successful. So
I mean, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility to manage your
I won't participate in that discussion.
In fact, you can frustrate the entire council process. It's neither here nor there.
Exactly.
I'll leave that to you, Tim.
Thanks.
Cool. Presentations. There are no presentations at this point. There are a number throughout the meeting, as I understand it. Confirmation of minutes. I've read the draft minutes. Happy to move the draft minutes. Do I have a seconder? Okay.
So wasn't here.
Okay. I move confirmation of the minutes. 8th February meeting is true and correct. So we're going to move. We've got a second to put that motion. Those for, aye, against, carried. Open actions from resolutions of the committee. Okay, I see there's two there. The first one notes engaging with central government in relation to wild and conifer control funding, and there was a meeting with the minister. My question is that the end of it? Was there a letter? Should there be a letter? Who should I ask that question to? Maybe the participants. Ian Robinson.
I'll say, Brian, what was the first part to do with that?
This is just the management of activities, and it was to do with engaging with central government for an increase in funding for the wild and conifer, and it notes the meeting that yourself, the Deputy MC, met with Andrew Hoggard.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I got full details now.
Yeah.
So I think we have updated the council before that. We met with Andrew Hoggard, and so that was a informal meeting with C. Richard and Councillor McCall, myself, and Mr. Hoggard, and also Minister Patterson. It was an intro after Minister Hoggard had basically freshly become the biosecurity Minister for Biosecurity, and he was talking about his portfolio, and we mentioned that wild and conifers are still a significant issue for Otago, one of our key priorities, and that aligned with his portfolio. More recently he spoke as well at regional SEC group in Wellington to that group, chairs and CEs, and mentioned that wild and conifers were one of his 3 priority areas in his portfolio of biosecurity. So that was good to hear, and that's really it where we're at, apart from other ongoing work raising the issue of wild and conifers and the cost benefit analysis. We've done that work as well.
Okay,
So,
cool.
yep.
You said it was an informal approach. Yeah. Is there any further formality that's required with that approach?
I think
Like a
it's
letter?
probably normal that we have conversations with other leaders from time to time. So I don't know if do you mean that we need to do a formal
That's a
approach
question.
around wild and conifers? Yeah.
Because that's what the option was. It was engaging. So there's been an informal approach. My question is, does there need to be a formal approach, or has that already happened?
Oh, not sure on that one. Richard?
Look, it's up to council whether you choose to write a formal letter. There's a number of conversations going on, both with a number of ministers. Lawrence has got a lot of interest. I mean, my sense is that they are well across the wild and pine issue, but the budgetary constraints are withholding any decisions on whether they invest more in this or not. So it might be a case of waiting for the budget in May. They are well across this issue from a number of parties, both councils, Department of Conservation and private landowners. And at that point, when we see what the outcome is in terms of future investment in wildlands, we can decide whether it needs anything more formal.
Cool. Thank you. The second matter is going to be addressed at today's meeting. So without any further ado, move into the first report, EcoFund application recommendations, and invite Councillor Craig.
And people have locked, I mean, I can go to the top or I can stay here. I'm going to take a long time on this, or stay here. Yeah. Good morning. Hello, Dr. Palmer, and Libby, Anna, and now,
Do we have to stop?
thank you.
Sorry.
Good morning. Do you want to present on this? And I also will welcome any contribution from the chair of the Eco Fund if you want to do that first or second. Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Well, no, I'll do that.
Yeah. Okay, Libby.
Thank you. So we've got Anna and Elodie here today who have written this paper. And it is
Your
just,
microphone, please, please.
sorry, to seek endorsement of the recommended applications for the Eco Fund and consumers funding, as well as our targeted groups under the Terrestrial Site-Led Program Fund. So we are happy to just take the paper as read and go into some questions,
Thank you.
unless Councillor Summerall would like to hear anything.
Yeah, thank you. I guess the general comments are, I'm very pleased the council had made the decision earlier to extend the amount in that Eco Fund, because there's clearly demand and there's such a lot of important work that goes on there. One thing I was going to explore a little with the panel there, if that was possible. Part of this paper is also about the decision around the site-led programs, and you'll recall that council earlier in the year made the decision to make that into a direct funding method, that is council deciding that rather than a contestable fund. And I just wonder if you have some comments on the maybe advantages or disadvantages, or general comments on how that direct funding approach went.
I forgot to add that we've also got Sarah Irvine online, and she is able to speak to the site-led. She's part of the working group for that. I can't see her, but I think she's there somewhere.
Kia ora, Sarah. Sorry not to introduce you.
Kia ora. Morning. Yes, thank you. So As far as the site-led direct funding went for this round, we undertook a process through prioritisation using the values and threats assessment and also cultural values to identify 2 locations of high priority within the site-led area. And we then undertook a hui with the groups and stakeholders within that area to start drafting a whole of site plan. So the benefits of that were that the groups were enabled to work together to develop a plan for biosecurity priorities for the particular priority areas, and that they were then able to consider working together and integrating their programs, and we could then look at direct funding against the objectives of the regional pest management plan with those groups.
Could I just add something to that as well? So there's definitely real benefits in the direct funding. We have also had some questions from some of the other groups who we didn't engage with around what was happening with funding and potentially why they weren't part of a contestable fund. So it's just managing that with achieving the objectives of the RPMP, which I think we are doing with the way we've done it this time. It's just weighing up with all of the other things that we've got as contestable right or as direct funding right. And I don't know if we ever get it absolutely perfect. Yeah.
Right, thanks. Yeah, no, it seems to me it was, from what I understood about it, it was a really usefully collaborative process with those community groups as well, and the involvement of the ORC. And I suppose as we are further likely to be going into looking if our proposal in the long-term plan, if that goes ahead, about the establishment of another fund, working on how that's going to work, it's really helpful for us to have practice in different methods of decision making there. Yeah, thank you. Look, I'm happy to open up to, well, leave it to the rest of you too.
First question from Councillor Ware.
I was just kind of like follow up real quick on what you just said there, Libby, around some of the other groups approaching around the site-led stuff, and I'm just wondering what we said to them and how they responded.
So one of the specific groups is actually recommended to receive funding through the Eco Fund. So that is a hopefully a good outcome. I don't know if Sarah's had other groups come to her or to Sophie, but we're happy to explain the process we went through, and that we've selected the high priority sites, and that the people working in those areas were the best people for this year to receive funding to achieve the outcomes of what we're looking to achieve. Sometimes it doesn't always completely line up with what the groups are looking to achieve. They might have other work they're wanting to do as well. So it's just managing that too. But yeah, we absolutely can justify why we're putting money into those specific areas, and we're happy to do that.
Any other questions before I ask mine? I've got, welcome, Councillor Moon. I've got a couple of questions, and they're not slightly related, but they are related, and it's best time to ask. Are any of the Eco Fund applications, starting again, draft land and water plan, in our consultation that we've done internally, there wasn't any feedback from EI or the implementation team, and I'm just checking whether there were any applications here that may require a consent under the draft land and water plan rules, especially as relating to aerial spraying, because that's something that we need to be really clear about when we're giving money, especially with 1 or 2 years projects.
Can I just confirm before Anna speaks, there was feedback from the EI and biosecurity team. This wasn't written, so there's been lots of meetings and
oh, sorry, we haven't seen it. Apologies, sorry.
Yeah, so there has been other feedback that hasn't been kept in the written stuff.
Sorry, apologies, sorry, I I thought we'd been given the responses, apologies,
So we're given, just for clarity, you have been given all the responses, and in that response it noted there was also verbal feedback that's been considered by the team.
Okay, sorry, can I still ask that other question though? Are there any matters, any of the applications that were successful, that if they were a long-term project, would any of the techniques that would require consent that needs to be taken into account?
As far as we know, there's not. One of the questions in the application is about consent. Of course, that's current consents, not future ones. However, one of the things we look at through signing up the funding agreements are any preconditions. So if a consent is needed, that is required before the funding is expended. And we'll look at that closely. As far as we know, off the top of my head, I don't think there are.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, if there were consents required, then based on the type of projects we fund through the Eco Fund, they would all be able to apply for the consent. I can't remember the name.
Yeah, the fund, I appreciate that, thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to check that process because it's difficult when we're doing longer term projects. And the only other question is about site-led. Now, I appreciate that most of the site-led at the moment are in the particular area of Dunedin City, and hence they've been consulted on this. There are some other projects that possibly potential applicants would say that they were equally important to provide a diversity plan, but they're not necessarily site-led. And I'm just wondering, and maybe it's a long-term plan question, whether or how do other projects or in areas outside of this area, if we did expand it, because of the limitations of the regional pest management plan, they would be excluded. We'd have to change the naming of the fund rather than, is that how it would work?
Yes, so the site-led program funding is specific to achieving the outcomes of our regional pest management plan, which are those 3 terrestrial areas that are around Dunedin. And we also have lead recycling as well, which we'll talk about in a different paper today. So the funding is ring-fenced to those areas for this year. In the future, I guess that would be something to consider with the large-scale environmental fund, if that was to come and be considered as part of the new long-term plan. So then, and through that, we'd then look at what criteria need to be set up for that. We also have the existing eco fund that groups can apply for. If there's good biodiversity and biosecurity outcomes, then they can apply through the existing eco fund.
Yeah, it's helpful to have that clarification when we're talking, because Councillor Simple talked about the future. Sorry, a question from Councillor Forbes. Apologies to
Thank you. And thanks, team, for your work on this. My question is around the ineligibility of around about a dozen or more applications. And I'm not talking ineligibility by rank, I'm talking just the ineligibility because they've done the form wrong or whatever. And I'm wondering if we have a process to let people know about the ineligibility in time for them to make any adjustments, or if we should have a process to do that if we don't. The process we have for the Eco Fund is the same for everybody. We're available to answer any questions and help with processes or eligibility or criteria questions prior to the submission. So they need to come to you?
Yes, or we have our catchment advisors who are out there talking with groups regularly anyway. So if they're looking at Eco Fund, they're usually aware of that. We do field quite a few calls. We've had quite a few Zoom meetings or Teams meetings with people about eligibility and what that means and what they might need to do to make sure they're eligible before submission. After they've submitted their application, the application process is closed. So there is no format in the current situation, in the process we have now for amending applications. And from a pragmatic point of view, resource-wise, we can't check all the applications prior to the assessment and then go back and then allow some to resubmit or to change. It just it becomes incredibly unwieldy and potentially builds in some level of perceived bias if we go to some and not others. So unfortunately, yes, we do try to make the instructions, the criteria and ourselves available as clear as possible prior to submission and for that whole month, if not earlier. We flagged this year in January that the Eco Fund was coming. And yeah, unfortunately, some people may misinterpret or miss some criteria that
just seem quite a high number, but maybe it's not. I don't know, but thank you for that and understand.
Councillor Malcolm?
Yeah, just a couple of wee quick, on page 11, clause 17, also independently reviewed and scored applications where possible. What do you mean by where possible and why weren't they all scored?
Sorry, I'd have to look, my computer's gone to sleep. Did you have that? Page 11?
Paragraph 17, about in the middle of it. The assessment panel consisting of 3 councillors and 1 Mana Whenua representative also independently reviewed and scored applications where possible.
Yeah, I believe that's because councillor Kelleher unfortunately was unable to make it that day. He had submitted his overall thoughts on the applications via email, but wasn't able to attend.
Oh, so they were scored, it was just you've had one person short.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the scores were collated from the assessment panel who were in attendance, and where relevant, any comments that were put forward to us from councillor Kelleher were considered, and I read them out, and the assessment panel considered those comments, but they weren't technically scores for the application.
And just to follow up one on applications declined, and it's again around Councillor Forbes' question, is there's quite a number that have been declined and eligible. Funding sought exceeded the amount for funding in this category.
Yes, so off the top of my head, the Eco Fund, most of the categories have a $50,000 cap in total, whether they're applying for 1 year or over 3 years. And the other one was the biodiversity, large scale biodiversity, which was $300,000 cap. And the individual incentives for planting for water quality, planting after wild and conifer control are $15,000 cap. And that's on our website. The applications, some of them were well in excess of that. One for the Eco Fund requested $124,000 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
One for rabbits requested $57,000, but the cap was $50,000. And for example, for planting for water quality, we didn't actually have any applications for that category. So where possible, we looked for any eco funds that other applications that would fit that criteria, but many of them were obviously over the $15,000 limit as well, because they submitted under Eco Fund, which was absolutely fine. So that was the reasoning for those ones.
So even if an activity was highly ranked in ecological environmental improvements, and you just cut it, you don't say, well, actually we could give them 20,000 of the 50,000 requested.
It becomes quite difficult to unpick somebody else's project to work out. Hypothetically, they asked for 100,000 and we said, oh, could we offer them 50? What component of the project will you then be scoring it against? Right. So if a project requires $100,000 for the project they've put forward, would we score it on what they've put forward or some other version, which would require a resubmission of the application, so we would be scoring it appropriately. It just makes it very difficult. We did discuss this kind of issue, not due to eligibility, but around partial funding with the assessment panel, and they agreed, they suggested that where we draw the line, if there's funding left over in that category, unless the project was obviously set up like some more of a global fund, that it would be impossible or very difficult to unpick and score it appropriately, because it would become a different project.
Right. So if do we? Yeah, have we communicated that 100% clearly, that part that we will not be apportioning parts? Because historically we have given out under Eco Fund, we have funded part of an application.
And that was in this round, you'll see there is still one where there is an offer of a part, or two, I think, where there's an offer of a part funding. That was a decision of the assessment panel to do that. And so that's still a possibility, but it depends on the nature of the project to some degree. On the other hand, the criteria for those capped amounts is clearly available on our website. It's in a table, I believe, for each category.
Yeah, I understand the capping, but so what we're saying is don't come to us the higher amount, you need to apportion your project within those funds.
That's correct.
Do we communicate that correctly?
Yearly, yes. Yes, that's the eligibility criteria.
So can I, because I know this is a conversation I had with Libby when I was reviewing reports, because I picked up the same thing, and it is communicated clear, but I think what we're finding is we have significant number of groups and new groups who aren't familiar with the application form, who may not pick that clause up in amongst, you know, their application, given they're new to the process. So there's always things we can look at to make sure it's clear. It is clear in the policy, but it's, you know, based on the fact when you look down that we have had a number come in this year who have obviously not specifically picked up that clause and applied it to their application, and we are getting more and more new groups apply, which is a great result. Then we can just look at how we package our communication and support those new groups so they do have the best chance of submitting an application that doesn't get struck off for not meeting criteria.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If there are not, I'm happy to move this motion. I probably just want to add another one in there, and I'm happy to be number 4, not only to thank the panel, but also to thank the applicants, all of them. This is huge work that the community are doing, and this contribution of $854,733.92 is only part of that which they have to raise, and the contribution that they do in voluntary time as well, and I think needs to be acknowledged as well in our motion. So I'd just like to add in a 4th one, that the council thanks the community for their contribution to making a better environment for us all in Otago. On that basis, do I have a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I should have probably left that for you to move.
That's right.
Do you want to be the mover?
I'm happy to move.
And I'll second. Sorry, apologies.
No problem.
Councillor Sunville. Any discussion? Sorry, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a part of the discussion, just in this part, I'd just like to just follow up on what Councillor Malcolm was saying regarding, because in the project there's been 2 or 3 that have exceeded it by not much, and we've been creating contacts and getting together in some areas, and then they've just fucked up, and perhaps it's because of inexperience on their behalf. So just part of this report was flagging a review of Eco Fund going forward. So that might be one area that can be prioritised in their view as to what support we give to new groups or groups that may be going outside the borders without recognising it.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Sorry, I didn't give you the chance to speak to your motion. Apologies, Councillor Sunville. I'm being very sloppy here today.
No problem at all. I'm happy to have something to say, and look, you beat me to it in making those thanks to the staff involved, to the Eco Fund Assessment Panel, those councillors and the Mana Whenua representatives, and of course especially the community groups who have put their time in. The Eco Fund, I mean, I think it's a very, really important initiative of the regional councils. It achieves so many things. It achieves those environmental outcomes we're all looking for. But of course, as well as that, it is a really important thing in terms of community action, and that community action that it encourages and enables strengthens those communities and empowers those communities in their own local area. And those are both very, very important things. Now, this is a recommendation to approve many of those applications. I recognise that not all the applications have been approved. And of course, we regret that we weren't able to accommodate more groups. And I guess it's just to thank all those groups involved and say, keep on with those good efforts. Councillor McCall referred to that 3rd recommendation about another review of the Eco Fund, which is a regular thing. And of course, we're learning all the time about how we may make our processes work better, about how we can do things to get those better outcomes and support the community better. And so the discussion that we've had here and the feedback we've had from applicants will definitely be taken into account in the review that comes on. So yes, happy to support all or move all those recommendations, including the extra one about thanking the community groups. Thank you.
given that, I'll now put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried unanimously. Thank you. Now you get a better chair coming back because I've been sloppy. Apologies.
Right.
Cool. Great. Okay, all good. Microphone on. Our next report is integrated catchment management. Author Anna Molloy. Thank you, Anna. Endorsed by Gavin Palmer. The purpose was to provide an update on the integrated catchment management ICM program. The key points for me were that the ICM program has been underway since mid-2022 with the establishment of the ICM work group and selection of the Catlins Freshwater Management Unit. The Catlins CAP development is progressing as scheduled. The work to establish a CAP development group for the Upper Lakes Roadie is underway and slightly behind schedule. And finally, preliminary scoping work is underway for the Tari FMU CAP development process. So, Anna, any intro or comments before we get into questions?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Yes, just to add a couple of updates verbally, because this paper was written several weeks ago. Since it was written, the Catlins ICG has held their third workshop, which was looking at the goals around values, and they're now moving into the development of strategies, or for want of a better term, actions for addressing the pressures and or enhancing the values that they've identified to date. Also in the Catlins, the discussion around the wider community involvement has been underway, and arrangements are being working on using the intended online spatial hub, which is a place that's going to host the eventual catchment action plan, but also enable members of the ICG and wider community to contribute feedback during the development of the catchment action plan. So that will be a bit of watch this space. Hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be able to put out a media release to direct people towards an online version of what the work is to date. In addition, we'll be planning towards looking at, when a draft CAP is done, how does the wider community get involved in looking at that, and it may do a community drop-in session or workshop at a point in the future prior to the finalising of the CAP. And last week, the ICM, Integrated Catchment Management Working Group, had a meeting, and from that, we have really pushed forward, we're starting to push forward with planning for the Upper Lakes ICG establishment. We still are waiting on the Runaka representatives to be nominated to us, but in the meantime, we have a process for holding hui to talk to people about being involved in that ICG, and hope to have that in place in the next, again, 3 to 4 weeks.
Cool. Before I open it to questions, and I see that one of the recommendations refers to a boundary. You've referred to the Upper Lakes, and no doubt that'll come out and be teased out in the question time, yeah?
In this question time here?
We'll come to it.
Yes, sure.
What are your suggestions, Anna? Should we talk a bit about, if there's questions, should we refer them to the Catlins, then Upper Lakes, then the Taieri, or we'll just take questions?
Yep, that's absolutely fine.
That's fine. I do wonder if you pulled your mic, I might be getting deaf. Actually, I had a hearing test the other day, actually, but
is that better?
Could be. Thank you. I actually did pretty good, actually. That's why I was brave enough to actually say what I said. Anyway, questions? Okay.
Yep.
Councillor Kevin.
Yeah, so and particularly on that boundary, on paragraph 26, 27, I'm just, if you are, I've got no problem, I can understand your rationale behind looking at the boundaries of these, but certainly I just wonder if the consideration has been given to the top of the hill and actual catchment boundaries as opposed to as opposed to boundaries that may be covered by one authority and another authority. A catchment actually starts at the top of the hill and works down. So I'm just wondering where your thoughts are of aligning that.
Yeah, we have the map we've attached to this one does just show the QLDC boundary.
Yeah.
We have explored other maps that show all the actual catchment boundaries, or the sub-catchments, if you like, of those areas. And the QLDC boundary doesn't align exactly, but it does make a lot of sense in other ways. So a catchment boundary, as you know, is very important for our freshwater management. And that's why we started with the Rohe boundary for the Upper Lakes. However, the people we would like to have involved, the communities of interest, if you like, in that Rohe are actually outside of it. So the Hawea Township is not actually in the Upper Lakes Rohe. And Lake Hayes, who associate themselves very strongly with the Upper Lakes, are not in there. So yes, we're not asking for a decision on the actual boundary, but the ability for that to be discussed by the group that comes together to develop the CAP and to define that scope. And it may be that the exact, like a geographic catchment line is more appropriate than the QLDC line, and that would be discussed further with that group.
Yeah, because integrated management is just not water, it's also your biodiversity,
That's right.
biodiversity and the likes as well. So, yeah, I would worry if we weren't going to the top of the hill to suit a boundary. And probably when you look at the lake, and the other part of that question, sir, is, you know, how does the Lake Hawea group align with our integrated catchment management process and boundaries? And so I'm just ensuring that that gets linked.
Yeah. The Lake Hawea stakeholder group work is definitely within the Upper Lakes Catchment Action Plan area.
Yeah.
And the work they're doing would be incorporated and built upon. So some of the work in some ways will have been done or looked at, but that is a Lake Hawea stakeholder group and doesn't necessarily involve all the stakeholders for the wider Upper Lakes, but of course it'll be kind of like a module that would be inserted on. But that plan is for that group, that is their plan. And that's great, and we're helping facilitate that. A broader plan would be consistent with that kind of work, and speak to it quite easily because we'd be using the same process of development.
Good, thanks. Thank you.
Cool, thank you, Anna. Kate, before my question, Kate, is your question on this particular topic? Cool. Please speak.
Having had the pleasure, and it's a substantial pleasure of working in the Catlins, which is a relatively discrete area. I'm just wondering, has there been, or are we, is there, given the time of the year that we're doing this over winter, is there a concern about holding the whole Upper Lakes Rohe to one group, or is there a discussion about perhaps having two groups, given the substantial distribution of interests from Kingston to Makarora?
I'm glad you asked. We have recently, when I say we, I mean myself and two of the team, the ICM team, have been up in the Upper Lakes speaking to some key stakeholders, some of the larger groups, so to speak, to give them an update on the Integrated Catchment Management Program. Because of the delay we've been experiencing, we wanted to make sure that they were still communicated with and talk about any issues or get their thoughts on things like the boundary and or the one plan to rule them all versus several smaller plans. One of the options that we are exploring, and again, only exploring, is whether there be two parallel processes, but still one plan. So the opportunity there would be, the advantages would be, say you have a Wakatupu Basin group and a Wanaka Hawea group.
Right.
They do the exact same process. Our team brings it in together to one plan, and at key points, perhaps 3-4 meetings in, they join as a group. So you get that advantage of actually seeing they're looking at very similar issues and potentially similar solutions, but we get that broad representation of communities. Of course, the disadvantages there are, there's a little bit little bit extra resourcing, but that's feasible. There's also potentially a capacity issue for other organisations, so QRDC or our Runaka reps. If there are two processes running, would they be required to go to both? If they just went to one, would the other group be missing out on that input, etc.? So nothing that can't be managed. We have the ICM working group has suggested we hold the HUI, gauge the level of interest, and then if two groups are feasible and there is that level of interest, then we would explore that further and possibly run that as a parallel process.
I suppose even the initial HUI becomes an issue where you locate it to get the best representation. So, and I thank you. I commend you for that, taking that very pragmatic approach. And I hope that the fact that we've got boundaries don't control what we may ask the community to develop for us and with us. So I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Cool. And if I may, in terms of the second recommendation, where you're asking for some flexibility in terms of the boundary process, ultimately, will the conclusion of that be still brought back to council for any further feedback, or are we basically handing over the power to determine that? Maybe it's a question for Libby or Gavin, I'm not sure.
I will let Gavin on to add in. Our thinking was mainly in the interest of time, that decision of the scope be allowed to be made by the integrated catchment group that comes together.
Yes.
And potentially the council being updated on that decision.
Okay.
However, of course, if there are ramifications we haven't thought of, changing the boundary means that the Dunstan becomes a different area as well.
Yes.
How does that work? I'm more than happy to take.
Yes, well, other stakeholders may have a view. Sorry, Libby.
Yeah, so just to follow up with Anna, we would like to have the group make the decision, but if there is a desire for the council to have that decision, then we can bring that back. So that's really up to you.
Cool. I'll leave that for council to determine. I was just asking the question. So I've got Lloyd and I've got Michael.
Thanks. Just to follow up on that, at the meeting we had quite a discussion around this, and it was really clear that we want to go up there and assess the community, where the community are at on both sides of the hill, and bring them together and come. And we just want to take our time so that we actually get buy-in of everybody across the whole spectrum. And we really want to be able to come back with the community recommendations of what they think works best and fits best. So it's really, we really wanted to be community led and community driven with these stakeholders. So I think it's just a matter of we made quite a pragmatic approach a couple of meetings ago to not rush in, to take our time and get our relationships going up in that area between our ORC and our staff and iwi and local communities and stakeholders, so that we can just create a super partnership, you could say, across everybody to work in the same direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Actually, what actually happened to my hearing test was that my left ear is not as good as my right ear. So if you think that I don't think you notice this is the reason.
This is why I didn't get the proctologist.
Michael.
Hi, thank you. Listen, there's sort of a variance between what you've just said and what Lloyd said. Lloyd's saying take a pragmatic approach, softly, gently catch a monkey, and you're saying, listen, there's a bit of a time issue here. Those two aren't compatible, those things. And I've noticed that one of the reasons for the delay is because the iwi haven't got their act together in actual fact and appointed Runanga reps yet. I'd be very uncomfortable to follow your particular question if there were going to be changes that wasn't formally approved at this table. And that would also, the staff should have to explain why they've made the decision to us or why they're recommending a decision. And given that we have created those boundaries as a governance team, we should amend those boundaries if they are requiring of amendment.
Okay. Well, you might consider a separate motion which we could take separately in that regard, if that's your view. Thank you, Michael. Alexa.
I just wanted to reinforce what Lloyd. I just wanted to reinforce what Lloyd was saying because I was at that meeting as well, and it was. I think that we are taking a really pragmatic approach, and it's taken some time to work through this. And yeah, and I know about the Lake Hayes situation. I didn't know so much about Hawea and Wanaka, but of course they are caught up in that too. And thank you for the report on that, which put me straight. But it was. I think that we're going absolutely the right way on it, and thank you. I think that you've had to take it slower than you wanted. There is a time pressure. But that's life because we have to find our way through that. Thanks.
Cool. And just a final question from me, and so things like the Catlins are going pretty well. Did I read, was it in this report or another report, where there's actually sort of an independent assessment of progress and value and so forth? Is that correct?
Yep. The Catlins is going very well. The group is very engaged. Not everybody can turn up to every workshop, but we are making efforts outside of workshops to contact those who weren't able to make a particular workshop. But and Councillor Wilson may wish to add to that, but I've been at several of those workshops, and the group are really doing a lot of work, which is great to see. In terms of the external evaluation, right from the start, the Catlins is a pilot, and we wanted to make sure that we evaluated the process and did we plan appropriately for success? What does success mean? What could we do better? So we have an external evaluation team who are undertaking that evaluation for us against key success and key evaluation criteria.
Cool. Thank you very much. Right, we've asked questions. Move into the debate side, whether people want to debate the point that Michael has raised, or simply move into the approving the recommendations. I'll leave that to council. Is there any discussion points, Kevin?
Yeah, I would like to move the motions with. I would like to move the motions with an additional sentence to recommendation 2. And that addition being, and any such adjustment be notified to and approved by council.
Seconded.
And if I could briefly talk to that, Chair, I think the process that is being proposed to us is exceptional. It will bring the communities with us, but we do need the final tick off by council to ensure that there are no other ramifications of those decisions. And I particularly point out the issue that we've had with the boundary change in FMUs for North Otago, that council had voted on a change and voted on a boundary, and that boundary change was changed without approval of council. So and has caused concern within communities. So I'm very happy with that process, but I just think we need the additional part to that final sentence.
Cool. So any debate points to the point that Kevin's raised? Alexa, apologies.
I would just like to know from the team, I mean, given we're up against time pressures now, how far that would push us back and how we, what council would need to know that is different from what we know now, which would be the reason I think we would bring it back. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Go with that.
Essentially, the next Environmental Implementation Committee is early August. And then, of course, the council meeting mid to late August to ratify any decisions of committee. So the scope of the Upper Lakes Catchment Action Plan would then not be known until late August. And that would, given that we were aiming to have our first meeting in April, that's the ramifications of that delay. It just defer the program.
We could bring it to a council meeting earlier in August.
That's right.
There's desire.
Yeah.
We can accommodate, we can accommodate.
Yeah, can accommodate that. So, sorry, there's some hands in the air here. So I've got, sorry. I'll get Richard to speak.
I just want to make sure, clarify process. So moved, and I just made some slight adjustments. I just want to make sure that
Was
the
moved,
mover
Kevin.
is comfortable with that.
Comfortable with that? Yep, yep.
And it's been seconded, so in debate. Yeah, thanks.
Cool. So I've got, I think Kate and then Gretchen. Is there anybody else got hands in the air? No? Kate?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the staff for the process. It's been, and I will reflect on being on the Catlins. The community have been really, really well engaged. Oh, sorry, the members on there. The members on the group are not all of the same thinking. There is robust and really good discussion, and that's been really well facilitated by the staff. If anything, I wish we were learning from the process to get people into a room early to discuss things and to come agreement about what they are passionate about. It's basically the wise response approach that came to us a number of years ago and asked us to take that approach much more broadly, not just on ICM, but on all our planning work. When you've got members of the farming community sitting and passionately talking about their biodiversity and how well they're doing on their projects, and talking to the people out there cracking for forest and bird, and they're all on the same page, and 99% of it they agree on. It is a wonderful, wonderful way of going forward. Also to get some clarity about what the really big issues are. We're so focused on the issues that central government tell us that we need to focus on, rather than those that are really top of mind in those communities, and they're not always the same thing. So it's been a really brilliant process, and I really want to acknowledge the staff that have facilitated those and are getting the best output. As far as the amendment to the motion, I don't think the community will be wrong on this, and I'm happy to have it reported too. I wish the word approved by council wasn't there, because it will delay this. Once we get people engaged in these, they want to run and get going. It isn't something we need to approve of our community. We've already got FMUs that mean nothing because of the RPS decision. We're going to have processes going across these things. It's just going to have to be fluid. We're going to have the flexibility that we require our communities to often do. So what is an FMU boundary for the purposes of planning may be very different from what a FMU boundaries for the ICM work. And perhaps we just want to stop using the terms FMU, because they're actually a regulatory tool. And this is a non-regulatory process. Anyway, so I'm not concerned at all about us approving it. I want our community to develop what they see is best for them, for the very reasons that that's working well on the Catlins, because they're doing what they say works for them.
Thank you. Gretchen?
I was going to say pretty much exactly the same, and strongly support what Councillor Wilson has just said. We all know that we develop regulatory tools, and that we've always said that they're a very small proportion of the population that we actually write them for. And actually, we strongly support the non-regulatory approach, which is often self-driven by communities with our support. We don't want to control that whole realm because we won't get the best outcomes if we try to do that. And as we've just seen through the Eco Fund and other indicators of what's happening in Otago, we've got a massive, massive surge of people getting on with it, doing it. Snowball action of great work out there. And actually this is totally different from the regulatory realm. And I think we could approve the boundary, but hey, if a group wants to work with another group over the range, or what, do we need to control that? I don't think we do. we just want good outcomes here. And we're testing how to get good outcomes and giving people a say on their own environments and what matters to them as part of that. So that's how I feel as well. Thank you.
Well, Michael.
Sorry, there are some illogicalities in what's just been stated by the two former speakers. On the one hand, you actually set the boundaries. On the one hand, you actually set the boundaries in the first place. So why did you do that? You did because, and this council did, because it was the logical way in which to set up integrated catchment management in those areas. And all we're asking for as councillors is if you are going to make a change to those, I think it's reasonable to say, why are you making the changes and for what purpose? The other thing can I say is that I'm not a kumbaya fan on integrated catchment management. At the end of the day, you are going to have division and dissent in some of those groups. And in Upper Lakes in particular, there are a number of disparate groups and individuals with a number of disparate interests and ideas. And there is going to be disagreement. So somebody sooner or later is going to have to make a decision about what happens when there is, and who is going to make some kind of decision that it brings into effect any management plan. So I just pointing out that it is a good process to have for this group of elected officials to sign off and for staff to explain why changes are going to be required.
Cool. Andrew and then Alan.
Thanks very much. Yeah, great report, and it's interesting from a landowner's perspective, and there's plenty of them out there across Otago, but moving towards a catchment action plan is sort of where most landowners, big or small, want to actually start on day one. So this is sort of exciting that you actually know, sort of along Kate's point around actually defining and understanding A, what you've got, and B, what you can do to make a difference from an environmental perspective. So it's exciting to get to this point for the Campbell's area. With regards to the amendment to number 2, I'm comfortable that the amendment is there, and the reason why is that the MPS freshwater management clearly requires council to define FMUs across their patch. So the buck does stop with us as a policy setter for this organisation. So I would feel I feel comfortable that that's been added. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Alan?
Thanks. Look, I'm all for local decision making. I've heard what speakers have said, and I think too that decision, that recommendation that will come from those community groups would be better coming back here. Our responsibility in the end, and we've heard what the Chief Executive has said, that our timings should be able to accommodate it so we don't have a hold up to the process. I understand that, right, Richard? Yeah. Thank you. So I'm happy to support that amendment.
Any further discussion? If not, Councillor Lloyd?
Oh, last, mate.
No, that's all good. I just wanted to probably confirm what's been said around the table so far. I think it's really important that we listen we really listen to our communities. I think at the end of the day, the buck does stop here. Because we're in a process which is a community-led and a community-driven process, but for it to have value, complete value going forward, it has to be endorsed by the council. So everybody's on the same page. So I've written down here, I think at some stage we need to pass on the power to our communities to actually do things and for us to trust them. But at the end of the day, because we're funding it, and it's basically one of the main reasons for the integrated catchment management program as a requirement through the MPS. So I can understand how we can bring it back, but whether it's really, I see it more to come back to confirm the boundaries as opposed to approve the boundaries, but it's pretty much one and the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. My view is that it's a reasonable motion. I'm going to put the motion both together. Firstly, sorry, I do apologise, Kevin. You're right to. I do apologise. You're on the left side. I didn't hear you.
Yeah, that's right. Scan with your eyes. It is about empowering the community to set their boundaries. But at the end of the day, as the regulator and as Councillor Loon has rightfully pointed out, if we're going to do something over FMU boundaries or changing activities within FMUs that affect those boundaries, we need to know. I think it will be a tick box exercise at the end of the day because the communities would have decided and we want that to happen. But at the end of the day, we have the legal regulatory response to ensure that it's done right, and that's why I want that final part of the motion put in.
Cool. No further speakers. I'm going to put the motion. We have a mover and a seconder. The motion is as outlined. Those for?
Aye.
Against?
Against.
Would you like that noted, Alexa?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Motion passed. Thank you. What's the time? 10 o'clock. Let's move to the next report.
We should beep every time someone says the end of the day. We've had that about 6 times in the last round. Seriously.
Okay.
Oh, don't worry.
She said at the end of the day.
Let's see, something times. Cliche this.
Okay. The next report is Marine Biosecurity. An excellent report written by Sarah Irvine, Duncan Campbell, and Libby Caldwell, and endorsed by Gavin Palmer. The staff are on Zoom, is that right?
Yes,
Libby?
yep, Duncan and Sarah are online. You can see
Cool.
them on the screen.
Okay, the key points that jump out to me are that the purpose, of course, is to provide an update on progress on the development of the Marine Biosecurity Program. The next point is the invasive marine pest species are a significant potential threat to Otago's marine ecosystems. Once a species is introduced to a region, it is extremely difficult to remove it, and the damage could have a devastating effect on Otago's native biodiversity, marine industries, water quality, and Mahika Kai sites. It is therefore important to prevent pest incursion and spread through pathway management, surveillance, and monitoring. Regional leadership of marine biosecurity is, in fact, the responsibility of regional councils under Section 12B of the Biosecurity Act. The ORC does not currently have a formal marine biosecurity program, and there is no existing management program for marine pests in the Otago Regional Pest Management Plan. Informally, however, work has been undertaken by staff. Moving forward, I also note that the draft LTP 24 to 34 includes funding to develop an Otago Marine Biosecurity Program outlined in Appendix 1. This includes 50,000 a year, 100,000 a year, 200,000 a year, 3 with 200,000 ongoing per annum. This proposed budget sits in the Environmental Implementation Team's biosecurity work area. Thank you. Libby, what have I missed?
Nothing, that's great. Thank you for that summary. Duncan has got a presentation to share,
Right.
which will give a little bit more insight to this paper and hopefully is slightly more engaging than reading all those words. So he's going to share his screen. So I'll pass over to him. And this is his first committee or council meeting. So lots of you wouldn't have met him before.
Welcome, Duncan. It's all good.
We can't hear you, Duncan. Are you talking?
You must be muted, are you, Duncan?
Can't hear anything.
He's not muted.
Yeah, it's here. Sure.
Duncan, can you try saying something?
Yep, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Sweet. I'll just provide this update from two computers, that's all right. So just go over briefly the area that we're responsible for. So we're the ORC is responsible for protecting the Indigenous biodiversity in the coastal marine area. So this is stretching about 480 kilometers from the Waitaki down to the Catlins. So in this area, we've got 5 coastal development areas indicated in purple here on the left. And this includes a major port, which we all know observes quite a bit of international and domestic vessel traffic. We've got proposed marine reserves and marine protected areas, which are yet to be gazetted, but DOC are looking to implement this later on this year. We also have customary protection areas significant to Kaitahu for Mahinga Kai or food gathering. So these are your Mataitai and Taiapure reserves. And this area also contains significant ecological areas identified by NIWA and ORC Science last year, which include bladder kelp forests and other important habitat. So marine invasive species pose a significant threat to Otago's biodiversity, marine industries, and customary practices. So, and a good example of this is really demonstrated in the Hauraki Gulf at the moment with Callirpa infestations, which are taking hold. They are able to smother the seabed and prevent any native kelp to grow, reducing fishery stock and recreational values. Marine pests spread through mainly through maritime transport. So they stick onto boat hulls and ballast, take in ballast water discharge. So Dunedin, Otago Harbour observes quite a bit of domestic traffic between ports like Littleton, the North Island ports like Morrison Point, Waitemata, and we're also a very important stopping point for vessels going into Fiordland and the subantarctic islands. So that's a pathway for pest spread from Otago. And pests like Sabella or Mediterranean fanworm, like we've got here on the left, are quite difficult to eradicate once they're well established. So if we might have seen this graph here before from our terrestrial programs, but we really, in the aquatic space, really want to be focusing on that early recognition and early detection so that we can have a good chance at controlling it and eradicating the pest. It does get quite expensive and it's very hard to manage aquatic pests once we get to that later stage of invasion. So marine biosecurity in Otago, we don't have any formal marine programs from the regional council yet, but in the background we have been doing a lot of informal work. The only sort of major work that's been undertaken is through Kaitahu and the University of Otago, who have been controlling Undaria, which is also known as wakame seaweed, along high value areas along the coastline. So it is the ORC's responsibility under the Biosecurity Act to work on pest management and managing the pathway of pests that are present in New Zealand but not present in Otago yet. So MPI do the border, so they manage new to New Zealand pests. The ORC biosecurity team have really prioritized work on wallabies, wildings, lagrosiphon, feral rabbits, and other exclusion pests. And we've really found the marine space as a major gap in our biosecurity system. So the biosecurity strategy has sort of set out steps for us to take in the marine space to meet our Biosecurity Act obligations. And in 2019, there was a national pathways management plan that was being put forward. This is no longer the case. MPI have notified us that this is unlikely to occur. So we have put secondary steps for this to sort of occur. So in the background, we've been building the foundations for a marine biosecurity program through a connection with Kaitahu representatives and engagement with other regional councils and other agencies. Our collaborations with Environment Canterbury and Environment Southland We've sort of been planning for potentially looking into a pathways management program that's consistent with other regions. And 2 university projects have been undertaken since then, assessing the risk of different marine pests in Otago. The ORC also attended a NIWA Biosecurity New Zealand Marine Pest ID training, and we've been with NIWA and MPI on their marine high risk site surveillance surveys in Otago Harbour. So this is for new to New Zealand pests, not for domestic pests. So Councillor Somerville has set out the long-term plan. So we have $50,000 proposed for next financial year, followed by 100,000 in the next year, and 200,000 for the duration of the plan. And the proposed next steps in the paper are to further our engagement with mana whenua partners to develop an approach. This is to be done, if approved, in the next 6 months, sort of guiding that approach. And once that is completed, we'd look to engage with the relevant maritime stakeholders to get their idea on what a marine biosecurity program would look like. We look at implementing the marine biosecurity engagement plan that's in the appendix, and work and discussion will continue with Biosecurity New Zealand to see how a national program, the national program can support the ORC through funding, tools and capability. And once drafted, a comprehensive program will be brought back to the committee. We also have 2 KPIs in the proposed biosecurity operational plan, which are to develop a program by the 30th of June, and to also collaborate with regional councils on freshwater and marine pest issues. Thank you very much. Apologies about the technical issues.
Well said, Duncan. Well said. Okay. Questions, Michael, and then Alexa.
This is very important. So I'm delighted this is here. Listen, we've done a crap job as a council managing pests on land and in lakes and rivers in this region. So I hope you're not using any modelling of our pest management at the Otago Regional Council since 1989 in your marine thoughts, because that would be an exercise in futility and failure. And you did mention that there is a pest management plan here. Interesting, you're going to talk about that a little bit later on. I'm interested in how you measure success. So once you, in your plan, I'm interested in where that measurement of success or yearly progress works. So once you measure a particular new to New Zealand pest in the maritime region, and you've got them nailed and you've identified what they are, the various species of whatever they are, and you then what will determine an eradication program. I hope you're not going to then turn around and say, I'll just try and manage this. And then I assume that there will be some form of yearly review that will determine whether or not this is succeeding or failing, this particular program. Is that part of what you're planning to do?
I can answer that. So just to clarify, if there's a new to New Zealand pest, that would be managed by MPI, that wouldn't be managed by regional.
So we're not
council.
doing, so why is this paper here then, if they're looking after it?
So they look after new to New Zealand pests, but as Duncan described, there are pests that are already in New Zealand that aren't in Otago.
Right.
So what we're trying to do is identify and ensure that we haven't got those in our region, because we're not checking that at the moment, other than through one survey that's done in the Otago Harbour. So in the rest of our marine space, we don't have the information to confirm that those pests aren't here.
So why aren't we doing that now? Why isn't that in the long-term plan?
We've put it in.
I mean, as a matter of urgency.
So it's just it is in the long-term plan. So it was identified through the build that undertaking this work in marine biosecurity was a priority because we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And so there's a dedicated staff member. It's great to have Duncan on staff, and there is budget associated with this program.
What's the budget?
So it's 50,000 in year 1.
Oh, so it is the 50, 100 and 200.
Yeah, and
That seems pathetically small for the kind of work that you need to do to be able to scope the Otago coast.
So that's the program that the team have put together to build it up over 3 years. If there's a desire through the long-term plan to accelerate that, we could have that conversation through deliberations, but at the moment, that's the staff recommendation in terms of building from what is effectively nil to a sustainable program where we are fulfilling, what is in that plan you've got on one of the attachments.
So could you move quicker?
No,
Because this seems really slow. This seems sort of local government pace.
We could move quicker. We are looking to partner with Kaitahu to develop the marine biosecurity plan. So we'd need to ensure that they're resourced and able to also meet that if we were to go quicker, and ensure that they have got the capacity to support that.
Why are they critical to this? Why can't we move anyhow? Why do we have to wait for them?
Because we'd like to partner with them to ensure we get good outcomes.
Sorry, are they holding you up?
No, they're not. We haven't
You haven't
progressed
done
this because we haven't got budget yet. It's through the new long-term plan. They're not holding us up. But if we were to move faster, we need to ensure they're also resourced to support that.
Sorry, just if that closes off that, I'm just interested in, because I think it's a good question for the table. Once we're underway, what is the process for measuring success of actions where we do identify a new to Otago pest? How does that process work?
So we have an existing incursion response plan at the moment. So if we were to find something, we would use our criteria and our template around what we would do to deal with an incursion here. And we would look for support from MPI and from other regional councils who have been through similar incursions. And we've got budget in the long-term plan to look at, to allocate towards if there is an incursion, whether that's terrestrial or marine or in our lakes, so that we can respond. And then if that was an expensive exercise, which in the marine space it is likely that it would be, we would need to bring back a paper to council advising that we've found this thing. So the more work we do in this space, the more we're likely to find. So it's not, we could do all the surveillance we want and hope that we don't find anything, but it's likely we'll find something at some point. And then we'd need to bring that back here for funding to ensure that we do eradicate it if that is desired.
Oh, thank you, Libby. What I like about this is the fact that it does settle down on an ongoing 200K per year carrying on. Anyway, you good? Thank you, Michael. Alexa.
Kia ora, thank you for that, Duncan. I noticed that you're the author of the paper on summer studentship, through a student internship here last summer. So, and congratulations on your job, and it's lovely to see it come to this. So thank you for that work. So my question isn't about that so much. It's actually more about the other paper, the student summer studentship on Undaria. And I wonder, Libby, if, because I know Undaria is also, and the paper doesn't refer to this, and I wonder about our working with all stakeholders, and there's a commercial interest in Undaria. Undaria is, the seaweed we use for sushi. And I know that it's not good to establish commercial opportunities around pest species for all of the reasons that we do know. But I do wonder why we don't include that commercial aspect in our reports and acknowledge that there are people exploring the commerciality and the possibilities of that. I think there's something fraught in there, and I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I'd like your thoughts.
So just to clarify the question is why we haven't included that in our report around the commercialisation?
Yes, and would there be any opportunity to do so and consider commercialisation?
Yes, and so I think that is something that we can look to including when we develop the program, and working alongside Kaitahu to do that is the best way, because that's potentially a opportunity for commercialisation there too. So we will incorporate that, because that's either a risk or it's an opportunity, whichever way you look at it. So that would be something that would be incorporated into the development of the program itself. We haven't got quite that far yet. We obviously know that there are commercial opportunities there, but we haven't got to the point of saying whether that's a good or a bad thing.
Thanks, and thank you for the reports there. Really, really helpful and interesting.
Well, thanks, Alexa. Kevin.
it's really interesting that, and I have no issue at all with working with our iwi partners, but I do have an issue when we have a legal responsibility that we are holding or possibly holding up work to ensure that they are resourced before we can do that work. And to me, that is a neglect of our legal responsibility. And we already know that in many instances, in many cases, they are under-resourced. I don't think it is the part of the ratepayer to wait until they're resourced or even to pay for their resourcing. The reality is we've got a legal responsibility and we should be working at pace to ensure that legal responsibility is taken. So with that, and I know it is question time, what have we done? What in establishing this, and I'll reflect on the words of Councillor Wilson when it comes to community engagement at very early stages of processes, no matter what it is, and that to me seems to be, and is proven to be the best way to get the best result. What in the initial development of this plan, what work have we done with those people in the community that are working in this space? And I specifically say Port Otago, who is our gatekeeper for biosecurity, as we know now. So what work has been done on this initial implementation?
I'll pass to Duncan and Sarah to answer that question.
And to be fair, Duncan had already referred to the step of consulting with other stakeholders, but yes, Duncan, are you able to assist?
So we've attended a East Otago Taiapuri meeting. So that's a customary reserve that has been managing Undaria for the last couple of years, but we have been engaging with just through email and through Teams meetings with all the other agencies with regard to regional councils and central government agencies on the matter, just to build our understanding of how the marine biosecurity system works. I think the idea that we had in the recommendations was that we would develop an approach with Kaitahu, who have been doing marine biosecurity work already in the region, and then go to all the community stakeholders once we've developed this approach. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, no, thank you, Duncan. I will make the point too, that if anybody's held up this process, it's not iwi and Runaka, it's actually the ORC, it's actually us. And we need to allow appropriate steps. And by what Duncan's saying, iwi, Runaka actually already have some mana in that space. Kate.
Can I, since you said that answered the question, I actually don't believe it does, and I want to further follow up. So, and I just want some clarity around that. So at this stage, we've consulted with agencies outside of Otago, and we've been to East Otago, but we haven't done any consultation with the people of Otago, the communities of Otago that are involved in that marine space.
No, we haven't.
Wow.
Yeah,
we haven't developed the program.
We need to look in the mirror.
We haven't been
So
funded
just
to do
for
it.
clarity, and I don't disagree with what Kevin's saying, we haven't started this program. We've found some resource from existing internal biosecurity resources and redeployed that into the marine space, which was a direction that we took, but didn't require any additional staff resource. We just were lucky to have that available. This paper is about starting this program in the next financial year. So at the moment, it is internal work. It is learning off other councils that are undertaking this work already and other agencies such as NIWA, with a view, should council support it through the long-term plan process, to then pick this up and do all of the other engagement that will make this an effective biosecurity program.
Thank you.
And I can just add to that as well. We have actually drafted an engagement plan, which is attached to this paper, and that does outline beginning to connect with communities and outside of those agencies.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so just again, on some clarity, you were saying that we haven't developed this plan, but I mean, in reality, we've even gone to the state where we've stated in our plan that we're going to engage iwi to do the the dive work if there is a pest involved. So we've gone the next step in saying, well, here's the plan. We're actually going to use iwi to do the diving without putting that to any formal tender process or without looking to any other part of the community that may actually provide those services at a more cost-effective and effective rate for our communities.
Yeah, so I didn't actually pick that up, but I'm not, Richard, any comment?
That's in the document.
We haven't engaged Kaihā Tahu to do any work. We've just had initial conversations with them because they've got Jobs for Nature funding at the moment to undertake Mundaria work. We also don't know if they have the capability or capacity to deliver a wider marine biosecurity program. So we've just had an initial conversation to see whether it's of interest, and it was of interest. So that's something we'd like to talk to them a little bit more about.
Cool.
And if we do procure services, it'll be following our procurement policy. So that's something that we need to do and that we do for all of our engagements, and particularly if we were procuring services such as diving, depending on the value, there's procurement guidelines as to how we would go about that.
Okay.
You need to change that plan then.
Okay, I've got Kate and I've got Tim, and did I see your hand, Michael?
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge, I think long-term, maybe in the plan submission we got from Rebecca McLeod, or guest, who was really critical of our lack of a plan in this space. A number of years ago, I think she did that as a trustee or chair of Fiordland Guardians, I think. So the risk is very real. And last year, I'll also remind us that we failed to have a number of cruise ships into Otago because they didn't have proper paperwork or stand-down periods because of the risk that they posed to Otago. It's a really big risk, and I'm thrilled that we have found some funds, and thank you for your leadership on that, CE, to do this work. What concerns me is that we've found an area that we're missing, but we're not actually dealing with it the normal way, which is through a review of the regional pest management plan and rebalancing that. I think the fix is right, and I don't want to delay by doing a review, but there are other issues that are, I think, equally important. I'm going to go into that in the next matter, because I think we're not as flexible as we need to be when it comes to pests and actually making sure that we've got our war chest full of funds and resources to do it, whoever the party to deliver it is. But the question I have, but I want to acknowledge Rebecca, who brought it to us, and I hope that she'll be involved at some stage, is understanding who pays. It's fine that we benefit economically, the tourism benefit from cruise ships, but this is something that's been paid for by a lot of people to fix. And can I just understand, when people come into port, sorry, absolutely, another matter, Duncan, first, couldn't we use a map that shows the whole coast of Otago, please? Because I'm rather passionate about the Catlins having to be down there, and it doesn't include it all, and they're special places too. And the messaging in your bigger one is that it's not either special or not included, and I'd hate that to be the case. But sorry, going back to where I was going, the question is, what are the ramifications for anyone either moving this internally or any pest, or bringing it in, or failing to meet the biosecurity rules that already exist? And what bonds do we ever, or do we have any process to bond people when they come in to ensure that they're really doing this? I'm not quite sure what the biosecurity for boats and ships are, but it's a huge risk.
So for cruise ships, that's managed by MPI, so they manage that. I'm not sure, I don't know whether Duncan knows, he can jump in if he does, around what kind of fines they've got or systems they have in place to manage that. So what we're looking at is where there's boats that are travelling between different harbours within New Zealand, what are the mechanisms that we might need to have in place to ensure that they're not bringing an existing species that's already in New Zealand into our waterways. Within the RPMP, we don't have any, as you said, we don't have any specific species in there, but that's because we don't know if they're here. So we can't put something in that we don't know about. So we need to do some surveillance to understand that before we start looking at the RPMP and what we might like to include in there. So that, I think, does that answer your question?
Well, we've got Underia, sorry, we do have Underia, but it's not in the RPMP.
Yes.
And it could be in the RPMP?
It could be. I'm not sure if it is in other councils. Duncan might be able to answer that as well.
Duncan?
Yep. So Underia is managed in the Fiordland area for Environment Southland, and they have a program in place there. I don't know any other council that has Underia on their RPMP, but they might do. I need to follow that up.
Cool, thank you. Michael?
Sorry, well, that raises the next question, which is, sorry, the Otago University study that was done, did you do it, did you? Is the Otago University study that's referred to in section 20 of the report, is that yours?
Yep, correct.
Oh, well done. You identified 15 different marine pest threats. So I assume there is only one and there are 14 still left. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct. Well, the 8 that were mentioned initially were ones that we have on our emerging pest list or organisms of interest list on our RPMP. So these are species that are not managed, but we are keeping an eye on. And the 7 that were presented on that second part of that report were ones that I think we should have been, that ORC should be looking for, if that clarifies your point.
Okay, so we've got 8 on the list already. And then we've got 7 that we're not doing it. We've just found out about it. We're not doing anything about it. And it takes an Otago University student to tell us this. I mean, well done, seriously. But, you know, boy, does that rather point to the scale of our negligence. Anyhow, under proposed actions on...
Contracted by the ORC.
Well, no, but the point is, what have we been doing since 1989? Proposed actions, though, on page... It's my page of my report. It's the last one before you get into the appendices. And you've got proposed actions. We've sort of coughed there that we're not doing a very good job. But the last one says, Otago Regional Council biosecurity staff have minimal experience in marine biosecurity. So we'll need to build internal capability and working relationships with others who are more experienced in this area. Does that mean that we're going to contract out responsibilities potentially to other councils or even private concerns that might have expertise in this area? Or does that mean that we're going to build capacity within the organisation?
That's a Richard question, I think.
Just trying to find, sorry, Michael.
Page 94, the
Oh,
last sentence, the
on
last paragraph.
diligent.
Yeah, 94 on diligent, the last sentence.
Yeah, so I mean, the internal capability building has started with the addition, obviously, of Duncan into the role, which is good. And then depending on the my take on it, and sorry, and it might actually be better for Libby or Sarah to speak to this, but depending on the actions that we identify within the plan, we will need to do what we do in most areas of our business, and that is to assess whether we have the appropriate skills and enough capacity to undertake the actions that we are committing to. If we don't, are we most efficient to bring those resources in internally through either an additional FTE or repurposing like we've done to establish the existing one? If that's the most effective way, that's the option. If not, we would need to go out and procure specialist resources. If we determine that we would be better off in this instance to go with a NIWA or someone, and make sure that we have the appropriate budget to do it. So it's a combination of all of those things, as it is in any area that requires technical expertise in the business. But at the moment, we are light in this area because you're looking at our expert. He's on the screen, and he's doing a good job. But I would
You're only going to get paid $50,000 next year, mate. That's a bit tough.
we won't go on there. That's not a governance matter. So that's where we're at, and you know, we will need to determine what sort of upskilling is required versus balance with where we are most appropriate to use external expertise.
Again, I'm just thinking of trying to push it quicker. And I'm just thinking, in this particular case, surely we would know by the end of the 24-25 financial year, the capacity that we require to answer the question that we're both asking at the moment, Richard. And then to bring that to, the annual plan of what, 25, 26, rather than this rather laborious three-year tranche system at the moment.
The 3 years just establishes a baseline in the long-term plan. If it's determined through that first year and the work that kicks off that there's opportunities to accelerate it, or the risk that the problem is far greater than perhaps we were anticipating, then you would expect something in the annual plan that speaks to some options around how much we would need to invest to make a difference.
So we'll get an update of this with the works that's required. That will come to us when? In a year's time, prior to the next annual plan? What are you thinking?
We can provide an update to inform the next annual plan.
Okay.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. Tim, if I missed you, I do apologise.
No, that's okay.
I've got Tim and Gretchen and Elliot, and at some point I'm hoping to wrap this up. I'm conscious of time. Thank you, Tim.
Look, I've listened to all of this and just aware of the immensity of the task of maintaining marine biosecurity and how effectively the ORC can actually do this. It strikes me that it is at least, well, at the most, probably just tokenism around this sort of approach. So, I mean, I guess the question is, how effectively can we eradicate a marine biosecurity incursion if we have one, or should we just perhaps be concentrating on surveillance and monitoring ships as they come into the harbour? I mean, how complex can we? This is a complex, really complex task.
The way I would look at it is we won't know the answer to the first question if we're not doing the surveillance to start with. So we actually need to pick up where there are issues and then have action plans to deal with those. So there's no point us dumping a whole lot of money in the budget for incursions that we're not undertaking the surveillance to find out about. So we need to get a proper program in place first to assess the risk and find out where the problems are, and then come back to council with some plans to address those and the costs that would be we would be incurring to do that. So it's a sound process in that sense. It's moving from nothing to what over time will become, you know, and I imagine that as Duncan continues to work through and other staff, you know, it will change as we learn a bit more, but it at least gets us moving in the right direction, and then can bring back to council some different options and some different ways that we might improve surveillance, or if we have an incursion, how we might respond to that. But I don't think we need to jump to that until we know a bit more about the issue that we're dealing with. And it is very complex, and it's why working very closely with other regional councils who are active in this space and with other agencies and central government with MPI is going to be important, because we'll need to learn a lot from them to inform the way we go about it.
Thank you.
Second question, and it's just in regards to the coastal management plan, and just sort of doing some reading for meetings ahead of us in the next day or two. I noticed the coastal management plan is a milestone, and our annual plan has been deferred further. So surely the coastal management plan will have within it chapters on biosecurity incursions and this sort of thing. Are we? What's the process here with the coastal management plan? What's happening?
So I can speak to that. And so generally it wouldn't, because it's managed under another piece of legislation. So it will reference the other legislation, but it won't deal with those things. They're dealt with under the Biosecurity Act and the best functions.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Gretchen, apologies.
That's okay. Instead of asking a question, I'll move the recommendation and speak to it, if that's all right.
That's great. Okay, can you just put that on hold, please? Elliot, did you have a question?
Yeah, Duncan's mostly us really, but I was just going to quickly check where other regional councils were on, if they had any marine biosecurity programs already, or if they're in a similar situation to us. Yeah, happy to second Gretchen.
Duncan?
Yep. So Environment Southland have a Fiordland Pathways Management Plan for marine biosecurity, and the top of the south, so that's Nelson, Tasman and Marlborough, have the top of the south biosecurity partnership. Other regional councils in the South Island are currently making plans to establish potentially a marine biosecurity program as well.
Cool, thank you. You good? Gretchen?
Thanks. Yeah, just wanted to speak, yeah, we're noting the report first of all, but yeah, along with Councillor Noon sitting on the Peace Plan panel in the past, and also I don't know, seeing how this council has undergone pest management in the marine space over many years. We did used to do surveillance and report on Undaria regularly. So a long time ago, we did do that work. We have legally established a pest plan for this region a while ago. And as part of that, it's a really robust process where you go through species that might be a risk and you assess them, and that's done really rigorously as well. And we've got to where we've got to. We've looked at risk species, and there will have been marine ones in there as well. And so then we come up with a program of what we're going to do right across the region in all of the pest space. We have some species of interest too that we look at. It's correct that at the time there was an area of risk identified, which was the marine space. And it's important to note that at that time, a national pathways approach was imminent. Okay. We have not seen that develop. And as a result, regions are now having to pick up their own approach. And that's quite difficult when this is quite a different issue to normal regional pests, which generally live within your region, or sometimes they hop across boundaries, but they don't usually go globally spreading pests, and they don't pop in right around the rest of the country. So that's a big job for regional councils to be expected to manage. And obviously, yeah, we have got rules nationally at the moment, and if there's a new incursion, we also have support from national organisations as well and government. So yeah, this is a interesting issue, this one. It's going to be quite expensive to pick up that surveillance across our region, but it was identified as a gap and important that we do that. But yeah, I just wanted to put this in a broader context of the fact that you do a pest plan regionally, which assesses where your key species of risk are and what your approach will be and what your budget will be to that. So it's not that we've dropped the ball, because we have done that work, and we could, once we do some more here, we'd have a bit more to develop a new pest plan, but that needs to be done in a robust way as well, because yeah, you can randomly address issues across your region, which I think was Councillor Wilson's issue, or you can do it in a really robust way. And we need to continue to keep our eye on the fact that this is a regional issue too. Thanks.
Cool, thank you. So Gretchen's moving this and Elliot's seconding it. Elliot, you wanted to make a point as well?
Yeah, just wanted to say that Duncan, the rest of the team has laid out a really good approach, and does seem like a very high priority and necessary gap to fill in our work. We may want to, reflect on the decisions or lack thereof of council up until now in this space, but I'm very happy that we're taking this first step now. And it is critical that we work quite closely with iwi on this kind of work, especially, not just because the local taiapiti are key pieces of our marine biosecurity picture, not just because tapu of Mataraka Māori in this space that will help us work towards the answers that we're searching for, but also because we're committed to meaningful partnership in all of our work streams. And so I'm looking forward to seeing the comprehensive program come back to us. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Well said. On that basis, I'm of a view, I'm hoping that we actually move the recommendations at this point, but I will entertain Kevin.
Well, I'm very happy to support the recommendation, but I just would particularly want to note clause 24 on page 87 and referring back to the comments of Councillor Wilson about mapping showing the whole of the Otago zone. But also, if you look, our marine area goes far beyond the Otago Harbour, and I see we've got Biosecurity New Zealand signs in Keres Bay, Deborah Bay, Back Beach, Otago Yacht Club and Karatani. There's a reasonably sizable harbour that has quite a lot of activity, and at the last count there's 35 boats moored there as the Oamaru Harbour. So I would just like you to, in particular, just to reinforce that that is the area. And also on page 100 of your document, you have outcome accountabilities, and you have those responsible for that at Kai Tahu and ORC, but in fact, we are responsible. So I don't believe that at the end of the day, ORC is responsible. So, and I understand why you've got it there, but I would just like to reinforce it where we have the legal obligation. Very good paper. It was a very good read, and yeah, well done. Thank you very much.
Cool. We've got a recommendation to note this report. We're going to move on in a second. I'm going to put this.
Sorry, I've had my hand up for some time. Sorry.
It's at his right here, though.
Yeah, I've got top two. Sorry.
Can't be that long because I was looking over there. Listening.
I'm going to vote for this, but I do think that there's a bias here, and I don't know if it's on the maps or something else. Marahuku have not been involved, and they're very much involved in the Southland and the Catlins area. And this is an area in the second report from the university. I think it is. There's a map showing Catlins as an area of interest. It's got boat wharves and things that people come in and out of, and bring the risk of a problem as well. I know Marahuku are very sort of in that area, and I'm not quite sure why they haven't been included. It's too late for me to ask that question. I might get on with the debate, but I'm really concerned that they haven't been included, and I'm sure that in reflection that can happen some other form. I wish it was just mana whenua rather than us particularising which hapu we involve in these things, and we have a more global view of Otago than just two parts of mana whenua. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thank you. I'm going to put the motion. Those for?
Yeah.
Aye. Against? Carried. Right, we're going to have a morning tea. How long is that going to be for? 7 minutes?
Yeah.
We've still got a few papers, but we are going to have morning tea, and we're going to start again at 5:02.
Yeah. Cheers, hungry.
Okay. We seem to have lost a number of councillors.
Because of the chocolate biscuits.
Is it?
Yeah.
Are they fine?
Bad mode.
We're going to kick off though. Here comes Alexa. Yeah, we've got to keep going. Anyway, welcome to this report, Freshwater Improvement Projects Update. By Libby Caldwell, Melanie White, Sarah Irvine, Jennifer Law, endorsed by Gavin Palmer. The key points that came up for me were that this report provides an update on 3 OLC priority water quality projects. That's Tomahawk Lagoon, Lake Getoto and Lake Hayes. In fact, there's implementation plans based on the ecological report for Lake Getoto and Tomahawk Lagoon have been drafted by staff. They're in Appendix 1 and 2. This report also provides an update on the ministry, the MFE funded Loitu Te Hakapupu Pleasant River Catchment Restoration Project. It also provides an update on the site-led freshwater pest management program for Lagos Siphon. Yeah, so what have I missed out, Libby?
Nothing, but we wondered, I was talking to Councillor Scott at the start about splitting, this paper's quite large, so
Yes.
we thought it might be good to just split it into its different sections and because there's been quite a few different staff involved. So we've got Jennifer here now to talk about Lake Tuakitoto and Tomahawk Lagoon.
Cool.
And then, so if everyone's all right with that.
That's a good
Talk
idea.
about that first, then move to Lake Hayes, then to the Tuitu Te Hakapupu, and then on to Lake Siphon at the end.
Perfect, let's do that. Thank you. Jennifer?
So if we can start with Tomahawk Lagoon, and we'll just take the paper as read, and we're happy for questions on anything that anyone would like regarding Tomahawk Lagoon or Lake Tuakitoto first.
Cool. Any questions, anybody? Andrew?
Thanks for the report, good stuff. My question was around the lower lagoon and just observing, and what people have mentioned, local people, is the build-up of silt in the bottom part of the lower lagoon. Reading the report, it talked about the siltation occurring, sediment occurring sort of from the 1900s onward for the upper lagoon, but not so much for the lower lagoon. I was trying to understand why is the difference in terms of that analysis. Does that make sense, that question?
So is the questions about the ecological report? That you're referring to, that
I think so.
Cawthron Institute have
Yes,
undertaken that for us.
Yes.
So I'm not sure why that hasn't been addressed, if it is a problem. But what we can do is we can look at it through working with our communities around what the concerns are. So we could incorporate something into our implementation plan to work with them about what those problems are, and if we need to, we can engage someone to give us advice around why that's of concern in the lower area.
Cool. Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I was just trying to understand why the difference was the one thing, and then because of what had been sort of raised by locals, but maybe it doesn't come filtered through with the actual, the group that is together now. This is going back probably 2 to 3 years or whatever. But anyway, I'm open to how it's either talked about at some stage, but I think it would be good just to understand a little bit more about that aspect.
Yeah, and Cawthron's not here to answer that, but they may have identified that the upper silt problem is a bigger problem, so that's why it's addressed in that report. But we also have our community consultation we undertook, and there's parts of that we haven't initiated yet because we're prioritising other bits of it. So in the longer term, that's something that we could look at. So Jim can work with the community and see how much of a priority it is.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I do note that one of the objectives is to encourage and support soil conservation to minimise sedimentation. And I think you've talked about, between the different years. So I don't think that point's lost. It's in there and there's various work going on. Any other questions? I was trying to find, Jennifer, Libby, because I was reading it this morning. There's a table there that basically spells out the budget and who's doing what. In fact, maybe this is it. Yeah, this is it here. Yeah, so it's outlined the fact that on page 224 that ecological assessment and consultation, which has been completed, was 56 grand, but there's still various zoning and stormwater education. There's enhancing riparian wetland habitat, and there's wetland construction planning going on, and budgetary sums that have been put there. And there was also, the previous table, well, there was also a table that basically identified which groups were taking responsibility. Yes, here it is on page 222, where, talking about Whenua, DCC, DOC, Eco Otago, which have already done water quality, fish and game, Tomahawk Lagoon Catchment Group, Otago Peninsula Biodiversity Group, Otago Peninsula Tomahawk Smiles Beach Care, who are going to be involved in planting, Birds New Zealand Land Care Trust Community. So ideally all those stakeholders are brought together and we get on with it, because we've been talking about this project for a long time. Thank you. No further questions. So what about Tokitoto? Shall we focus on that, Libby?
Yeah.
I'm sure Lloyd's got something to say there.
Tomahawk. I've got one question. So the last implementation committee, we had presentation from some people that were going to be doing some planting on a farm and growing in the nursery. I was just wondering whether that's been progressing.
Yes, so that has been progressing. We have been working with them to flesh out exactly what they were looking for in regards to funding and the project. So we've got a funding agreement out with Eco Otago to continue on with their water quality work that they do with the schools down there for another year. So that's out with them now. And Jen is working on figuring out how to do the fencing and planting with Smales Beach Care, Tomahawk Smales Beach Care Trust.
Yeah, Beach Care Trust, yeah.
And probably another question I do have as well that probably covers all the topics is particularly with the three, because we got funding 260,000, I think, set up for Tomahawk and Eco Otago. I was just wondering how much have we got left, or we got specific amounts earmarked for on the ground actions.
So Jen can talk to that. That's what Councillor Scott's budget was just talking to.
Yeah, that was for Tomahawk.
Page 7 for the, looking at the other one.
Is it?
It's on page 236.
236. Thank you.
For 228.
Cool.
Yeah, so for Lake Tokitoto, on the ground works, including fencing and planting, we've got 20,000 set aside for this financial year and 90,000 for next financial year. And for Tomahawk, we've got approximately 45,000 this year and another 28,000 for next financial year. But we'll be working closely with those community groups on the ground to see if that fits in with their capacity on delivering those works.
And just to clarify why it's going into next year, so because we only had the 3 years of funding, which ends this year, we haven't delivered all of the work because we've been working with the community to develop the best program. So we have checked with the finance team and we're able to carry forward that money because they're targeted rates. So it's not coming out of the LTP. This is on top of what we already had. Just to clarify that in case anyone was wondering why it's in there for next year.
So and I can probably assume that your facilitation or your internal staff just comes out of your normal operating budgets for overall.
Yes, and Jennifer will still be leading these two projects.
Awesome, thank you. I'll come back to Tokitoto.
We're on Tokitoto now.
Oh, Kate. Sorry, Kate.
Thank you. On page 5 of the appendix, which is page 234 of the report, when it's the implementation plan for this, you've talked about Otago South River Care Group and who'd be delighted, I'm sure, to do the fencing and planting activities. Have you engaged with them on that?
I've given them a heads up about this, and I'm meeting with them on Friday in Cameron.
With them, I'll be in Cameron, great. So that, and so what I think I picked up, and I'm just checking, declaring that I'm as a regional council rep on Otago South River Care. So I am interested because they've got a ongoing budget they're looking at. We were discussing that last week or earlier this week, one day, can't remember when. The 20,000 in here for this year will be carried over, I think is what you just said, or can be started now. These budgets were done some time ago. Can I just understand the reality of what we expect to have delivered for that price now, compared to the costs? You know, with those that aren't aware, on-farm costs have gone up substantially, and I think fencing is well above the 20% average. Are we going to be able to deliver realistically, or should we be having a discussion internally about delivering the best result, and whether we need to be looking at this in a different way?
So the budgets were set up during the last LTP, and at that point it wasn't clear what activities would be undertaken. So we have retained the same budgets, and we will deliver the best outcomes possible with the budget we have.
I suppose the other part of that question is, if the need is, in order to get the outcome we need, and this is a ORC-led project, what process is here, whether to inform the long-term plan or any other part of this, to get the best result? This is a one-time project. Should these costs not be sufficient?
So we would bring back to council to make decisions around what else is required to achieve the outcomes that are needed in both of these areas. And then it would be for the council to decide on how much funding goes to these ORC-led projects.
Yeah, I suppose, and when is that likely to happen, considering this work hasn't happened yet?
Well, we have done the groundwork around understanding the ecological assessment.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, sorry. So we've got a budget here of, because we fixed it at 260, we've got a budget for fencing that we've come out of that. Is that assessed on what we want to deliver, or is it assessed on what we can deliver? Because they're different.
So it's assessed on what we can deliver at the moment, but we haven't fleshed out exactly for Lake Tuakitau exactly where the fencing would go or where the planting would go. So we need to work with Otago South River Care and other community groups in Mana Whenua to ensure that we are getting the best outcomes, and we will do that. And if we think that there is a shortfall in funding, we will bring that back and suggest that there's potentially more required to deliver these outcomes. And then it would be for the council to decide if this is to go ahead.
Thank you. That's great.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Libby. Lloyd.
Thank you, Brian. I've got one or two things here. I'll just go back to the Portland Institute recommendations of their one. So their main recommendations were to reduce nutrient loads and manage legacy sediment. So managing legacy sediment was the number one highest priority that they had on their report, whereas there doesn't seem to be any actions around that in your ongoing management. I was just wondering where the actual managing what's there now fits into the proposal.
We don't have, we've used the budget we have to assess what we can deliver with what we've got, but we can come back with more, working with the community and Mana Whenua around what the best outcome will be. So yes, we've got the information from Cawthron around what they're suggesting as the highest priority, but we also need to ensure that we're delivering things on the ground that it can be seen, and that there's no, and that it's good use of ratepayer money.
I think that's good. I think we just need to recognise that no matter what you do around the area is not going to take the sediment out that's already in there. So you just got to be really, it's got to be qualified a little bit. You can only do what you can do. So, and it's really good to see an emphasis on fencing and planting and protection of cleansing of water prior to entering the lake. And there's been a lot of stuff done with the new weir and that sort of stuff as well to help that with the diversion and stuff. It is also like really important that it's community driven as well. And I know there's a community sitting there waiting. And I think there's just somewhere where it's like somebody somewhere has to actually take a lead and make a phone call and get people working together as one. So that's what I think that's I think we're at that stage now, which is good, and it's at the end of the day it's a simple game. You build relationships and you get together and work together to get an outcome. The other one that probably concerns me a little bit is I was reading about a wastewater management plan, which seems to come from data from 2015. And it seems to I haven't heard anything about this too much prior to reading this series of reports. And it just seems like something where I'm just a little bit concerned it hasn't been like it hasn't been tested with the communities, or it's not been like it's not been like a joint thing that if we go out with a whole lot of banners and signs, that it may not end well. It's not really good for relationship building, put it that way. Because I know I know there would have been massive infrastructure changes around, particularly on land holdings around effluent management or agricultural waste management and stuff like that, but also around.
So the question is.
So I'm just wondering my question is how are we going to.
I can answer your question. I think I know what it
He didn't even get it out after all that.
Yeah, well, I didn't have
And you knew what it was.
I do know what it is. So why are we doing it?
Yeah, why are we doing it?
Yes.
So it's all preemptive.
It was included as part of our original outline management plan as an option for the community and was consulted on at that point. And it wasn't one of the highest priorities, but one of the reasons why we can achieve this is we would like to pilot an education program, and it's specific to septic tanks. It's not for agricultural or effluent waste at this point, but we can always look at that in the future. And we would like to test it in this community with our catchment advisors leading an education program around what we should do around septic tanks and maintaining those and ensuring there's good bacteria retained within those two so that they're performing as well as they can be. So that was really just a pilot for the rest of the region in this area, because we have the data from, even though it is from 2015, to say that there is potentially a problem with septic tanks in this area.
Okay.
So that's why it's in there, if that answers the question.
Well, no, I think that's really good. I think it's just important how you introduce it into the community. Yeah. Makes sense.
Cool. We good? Should we move on to Lake Hayes? One comment I'll say about Tomahawk and Gilpin is just that, we've just got to maintain the visibility, as Lloyd says, maintain the connection to the community and stakeholders. We've got to do it. Thank you. Okay.
For our Waifakato and Lake Hayes, we've got Jana Davis here, who is the
welcome,
chair of our Waifakato strategy group. So he's going to be with us today and to give a little bit of insight around his thoughts on the group and how we're going in Lake Hayes. But I guess, would you like to give a quick introduction, Jason?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tēnei te mahi atu kia koutou, tēnā koe rangatira. Nei mai hara mai, tēnā koe, waitaha kāti māmo I kaitahu o ka iwi. Ko oraka aparema toku runaka, ko taku tau te titi toku marae. Ko hana nui te manga, ka aparema te awa no tāhuna, me waihopa hau. Ko Jana Davis tōku e kua. He kaimahi mātou mai te rōpou te tapo o tāne. No muri huku te whenua. Mai raro nā runake e whitu o te wahi paunamu, mai te rātaki o ka tipuna, mai te tukoto o tūrako kamakapuna mō pōpō. Mai nā mauka tapu o takatimu, ka puta tiki tai me waifakaata, me kawarau, me matau, ka puta tiki tai. Mai te tikanga, me manaaki, nā mare me nā pāke o te taha, o te moana, o te nāhere, ka tangata kātoa. Nei mātou e hono ka kia koutou, kia whakanui te kaupapa, whakahirahira. Toitu te marae o tāne, toitu te marae o Tangaroa, toitu te iwi, Mō tātua mō kauri amuri ake ne, anō reira, a tēnā koutou, a tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora.
Translation, g'day. Hello. Well, kia ora everybody, my name's Shana Davis. I'm born and raised in Queenstown. I whakapapa to the Caribbean at the south, Cold Bay. And I have a deep connection with this beautiful lake, Lake Hayes, Waifakaata. So Lake Hayes, the original name, Waifakaata, can be translated to the shimmering reflection. It's a name that's not really known by a lot of people. It certainly wasn't known 5 years ago. But on the ground, people are starting to say the name. And it's only recently, after an Indigenous leadership trip overseas, that I've been talking with Libby around our strategy, our approach to healing this water body. And it's all in the name. We're to uphold the namesake. This lake is of strategic importance to mana whenua because of its degradation over the last 50 years. Now, back in the 50s, the record was around 1,000 perch in a day. And these days, you wouldn't want to fall off your paddleboard. What we're seeing in Waifakaata, we're not seeing in our Great Lakes, but it's happening. The lake takes 1.8 years to turn over, and we're starting to see the health of the lake turn around. Well, why is this important? It's important because of its geographical location for New Zealand, for the world, and its ability to help educate at scale the issues around water quality, climate change, pollution, and most importantly, how do we create better relationships between our community and the environment? We can throw all the Jobs for Nature funding at the wall, but unless we actually have that ownership in the community, we'll be funding it all day. So we're now about 3 years in, and really, truly want to talk Gavin and Libby. It's been a fantastic partnership, and just to highlight that this is a special partnership for me, for Ngāi Tahu ki Murihiku and for Ngāi Tahu ki Ātākau, because of the gains that we're seeing on the ground for what a good partnership can result in. There's a big engine room that sits behind a good partnership. I have access to all of the Ngāi Tahu Holdings data teams, Ngāi Tahu Seafoods, our policy teams, our freshwater teams. We get a lot of commercial oversight, and that commercial oversight is a key gap in much of our catchment rehabilitation services. It's a commercial approach to understand that we do need a sense of urgency, we do need to de-risk, and we do need to de-cost. So it has been slow, and further to the kōrero earlier, the resources it's an issue. It's an issue for the council, it's an issue for the district council, and it's an issue for mana whenua, but we're on the same team. And so I'd like to see this group is maturing greatly. We were slow off the mark to approach our strategic plan. And myself and the other mana whenua rep, Jill Hopkins, when we started this journey, we put our foot down to say, how can we create a strategic plan without truly understanding the cultural narratives that are associated with the lake? How can I talk in a safe space without actually truly understanding the wider understanding of the Mahinga Kai values within the catchment? So we went and we took the time. We mapped the cultural values with Ōkaha and Te Ao Marama, supported by the Otago Regional Council. And over that time, we've really started to understand we've created the space to actually understand the true issues, not just with the catchment, but with the industry. Socially, culturally, economically, and environmentally, how are we approaching integrated catchment management? Where are the gaps? The fallout of Jobs for Nature is going to create a lot of short-term necessities. And they're very real issues. They're people. They're our people on the ground that are doing the mahi for us. And so I'm really conscious of that, of those short-term needs in the environmental space, which is why we're all here supporting the environment. But I'm here to talk around medium and long-term gains and how important that economical power is for us to actually get it right. I run a charity for Ngāi Tahu ki Murihiku, Te Tapuatani, And the first priority from Ngāi Tahu was how do we get this sustainable in the environmental space so we can stand up more socially and more culturally. We must stand up environmentally always. We must stand up economically. Queenstown economy generates, as we know, over $1 billion locally annually, and it creates an opportunity that many of our catchments just don't have. And that's the strategic importance of Waifakaata. It's not just for Queenstown. What we're doing in our headwaters is affecting whānau, Kiritai, mountains to the sea, but it also is creating an economic opportunity for us to learn the business, build the business plan with our treaty partners, and then show that we can put the outcomes into other parts of the takiwā. Working currently, Hāwea, Queenstown, Fiordland to the Catlins, we've got a fairly large area of interest. And it's the same conversations in every catchment. It's funding, it's short-term needs, but we need to be supporting these longer-term outcomes. So next we're heading into our strategic planning phase, and that's going to be a big focus for us. How do we start building outcomes to reduce the cost on the ratepayer? How do we truly treat this as an investment? An investment. It's not funding, it's an investment. And how can we prove back to the ratepayers what that investment actually means? That's the good thing about partnership with Ngāi Tahu, because we have this de-risked engine room that sits behind us, and I love accessing it. Libby and I are going to shoot up to Christchurch next month for a biodiversity forum, and it's really just to try and understand where's the common ground, how do we get there together, and how can we prove what success looks like so we can go and share this information with the other catchments. I really believe in the approach that we're taking, and it's actually being used by Ngāi Tahu in another of other key catchments that we see of strategic importance. But make no mistake, this catchment is a little bit different. We've got good partners with good commercial oversight, DOC, QLDC, ORC, Mana Whenua, and Friends of Lake Hayes. And we've all got these fantastic organisations behind us that have depth and learning. And it's important to also understand that as the group's maturing, so is all of the reporting. You know, it's not just through our ORC, it's through the tribal authority that hold the mana-to-mana relationships with central government. And just understanding that how important that due diligence is of where the final buck stops and how we're reporting. It's that type of reporting that we need to be seeing across all catchments and helping lift each other up so we can see better outcomes on the ground. It is a slow process, but this is one of the few catchments that I'm involved in, and I'm involved in a lot, that I can see the burden reduced on the ratepayer while also creating a relationship with the ratepayer. I've supported the ORC over the years in a number of freshwater forums, and I don't see our community there. They're not rocking up. So how do we get more ownership in those meetings? It's good partnership, it's good advocacy, it's good de-risk business models. If you go to a mountain bike community meeting in Queenstown, you'll get 500-600 people. Our last planting event in that community, we had 1,500 in the middle of Coronet Peak, which was a bit of an ask to get them down there. But how do we get those type of numbers to our meetings? Water is so important. It's not just about the take, it's about the give back. That's the opportunity with Waifakaata. We're going to be doing it. But I really want to understand how do we get the right support? Where are the medium and long-term priorities and the programs in the integrated catchment management space that we're supporting, but not looking at like it's funding? Where's the resilience? Where's the long-term objectives? So, kia ora koutou.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for the mana that you bring to this project. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, yeah.
Got one, but it's sort of all the projects together, so I have to wait until the end for that.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Any Pacific ones? So you got, sorry, Alexa, I do apologise. You're the person.
It's very difficult being on the lead day. You mind?
This these days.
Whatever. Janet,
Forever.
just throwing your question back at you, how do you think we can engage communities into these processes? Because that is, you know, as you know, has been a major sticking point for a long time.
Jobs for Nature has turned a lot of restoration into needing to be resourced, and advocacy requires a lot of resources. I believe one of the most effective ways that we should be approaching integrated catchment management at the moment is to be setting up purpose-built vehicles within catchments that are set up purposefully designed to create economical investment in which they operate. And we then use those resources to create the advocacy that we need, but also
Sorry,
knowing
what does that mean? Sorry, you lost me.
it could be a cafe, it could be a shop, it could be a tourism operation like Shot Over Jet.
Creating opportunity for people to
Like social enterprise, but also understanding your target audience. Queenstown is tourism, South is agri, South is energy, and understanding where those different groups actually congregate and operate. And you know, we are the community that we serve. So talking with our own employees around, you know, where are people? They're not just on the marae. You know, down south it's Transport World, and it's the Burnt Road, and it's the Oyster Fest. In Queenstown it's Coronet Peak and mountain biking and hiking. But it is a great community up there that is completely underrepresented in what we actually need. We need to be building our communities for us. So I hope that answers your question, Alexa.
Cool.
It's good. I'd just like to add, as I should have opened, thank you very much for your work in this area. It's been really effective and I'm really enjoying watching it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexa. Any other questions? If not, we'll come.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, Kevin and Elliot.
No, look, thanks for your overview. Really appreciate it. So Kevin, what's the phone? I'll talk to you all now. So is what I'm hearing is that no matter what problem we have or what situation we have, the best way to do it is have community ownership of it.
I think community ownership at the right level to help us understand priorities, but partnership sits at the partnership level. We need to be listening to our communities, absolutely. We need to understand the strategic priorities of community, mana whenua and Crown, and then working together to assess which we need to be prioritising first. You know, we've only got so many resources. So where's the common ground? Let's start working together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go to Elliot, I will make the point that I have read the cultural report and that went through the background, so that created a scene, the history, the values and so forth. And the part that really resonated for me, that at the end of the day, your expectations are very in common with the council's expectations. You want kai in the lake, tuna, you want water quality, you want appropriate biodiversity, and thank you for the work that you've created a scene and you'll be looking strategically, so that's good. Elliot.
Look, Councillor, I just add one point on that is a strong foundation requires ecological and a cultural foundation. And that's the strength that we get in our business cases. It's our point of difference. Let's capitalise on our points of difference, not just ecologically, but culturally. Because once you tap into that right network, it'll start growing on its own. And that's ultimately what I think we need to be seeing at council is how are we focusing on opportunities or investment that'll help us outside of the long-term plan or outside of more community investment. Cool.
Thank you. Elliot.
Yeah, this is probably a question for Libby in an overarching sense, but I'd love to hear what Jana thinks about it, specifically with the Lake Hay stuff and Jennifer for the previous one. But I'm just sort of wondering, we've got these programs coming in for these individual sites, and I'm just wondering if there's any lessons that we're looking at from the site-led implementation stuff with the West Harbour, like Mahiwaka stuff, because they seem to be all sort of tailored, slightly different approaches. I'm wondering if there's any oversight in comparing what works and what doesn't, and how we can make sure that we can like all learn from all of these projects to benefit all of them together. If that makes sense.
I'll start with, we need to start building gap analysis on how these catchment groups are working. We need to understand the depth and do some due diligence on governance structures and just how far up that communications line is going. But most importantly, as we're moving outside of Jobs for Nature, which was built as a COVID response, we start understanding the resilience in the groups that we're wanting to invest in. We're not funding, we're investing in our future, we're investing in our mokopuna. So where's the resilience? And let's test that, but also not just test, let's support, because we've got a lot of good people out there doing a lot of good work. So I'd be looking at the resilience on the catchments themselves, the rangatiratanga of the catchment, which is self-sovereign across the four.
And just, I can add to that too. I think for every project we're working on, we learn something new, and each community is unique, and so there's no one size fits all, I guess, is probably the answer, and we'll continue to learn. We might make a mistake every now and then, but we'll learn from those and be better. So that's.
I'm just wondering if we have any sort of formal process for, say, we do learn a lesson or make a mistake or anything in one thing, to capture that and take it to those other site stuff and be like, this worked really well here, let's bring this into here as well, this might work here.
Yeah, so Amanda's not here, but within her team there is a role, I might get the name of it wrong, strategic engagement, and they are setting up a community of practice across the organisation to have all of this information come in and learn from, so that when we go and do our engagement on projects that that will happen. That's being set up at the moment.
Cool.
It's a relatively new role.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dana. I think maybe it's appropriate to move to the next sub-project, Toi Tu Te Haka Pupu.
Excellent.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, Toi Tu Te Haka Pupu, yes. And we've got Melanie White here, who is the project manager for the delivery of this project.
Yeah.
So we're happy to just take any questions.
Okay, so you're in your last year of delivery to deliver on all the objectives of the MFE funding deed. Yeah?
Almost.
Almost.
The last year starts on the 1st of July.
The final year starts
On the 1st of July.
Okay, so
So it finishes 30th of June 25.
25. So there's a year to go, a bit more.
Yes.
Okay, questions? Elliot.
What happens after that?
Good question. We're looking at that now. So yeah, the partnership group are going to consider that, and we'll bring you those details when we know. Yes.
Cool. And Kevin, you've been to I think you went to a meeting, different points. Any comments from your side of things?
Oh, look, yeah, I think firstly I'll turn my button on. One of the things that's coming out with it is the involvement, and probably needs to be acknowledged in here, is the involvement with the whole community, and that's particularly around the East Otago catchment group, and working in with that group that everyone is bonded together. And we had we call it the award evening, I suppose, where people were acknowledged for their participation and the work that had been done. And when you hear how the groups have been working so well together, I think it's been a pretty good model. It might have, there probably was some separation in groups early on, but that's been broken down, and I think now we've got something pretty strong to go forward with. So it's a pretty exciting model, really.
Okay.
And really just following on with what Jana was saying about how do we keep that growing, I think that's the time now. Without this big bulk of funding, I think we've just got to sit back and say, how can we keep that momentum going with a limited cost structure? And I'm sure there's enthusiasm within the community to keep something going. So that's probably our next test on that project. Yeah.
Well said, Kevin. Any questions? If not, I thank you for your work. Keep it up. You've got over a year to go, and keep planning, as Kevin says, for the future. And councillor Wilson had a hand up apparently. I missed that. Sorry. Kate.
Look, it's just the same issue I had asked, sorry, question I asked before about fencing. These projects are really reliant on us doing fencing and planting. Planting can happen anytime and actually can be cheaper than sometimes, but the fencing is really key and it has to be good fencing. How are those costs going against budget, given the costs overruns that many of us are hearing about?
Yeah, so one of the things we did earlier on is have a realization that our budget wasn't going to extend to the funding deed objectives in terms of fencing. So we are going through a deed variation process. The 60 kilometres of fencing that was in the deed is actually unachievable because there's not that much river in the catchment. So, and some of it was already fenced. So yeah, we have reduced the objective there to 20 kilometres and we will achieve that. So that's what we've done, and same with planting. Actually, planting costs have gone up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so we've reduced that to 75,000 plants.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Lloyd, I'm conscious that we're 20 to 12, few reports to do. Go, Lloyd.
Well, so if you read, so I've got a few notes on this one, but so you've reduced your project down a little bit, so you've renegotiated your milestones. Has that resulted in a reduction in the funding?
No. No, it hasn't.
So the MPF have agreed to keep funding the same for a reduced amount of pay?
Yes.
Now, the other question I do have as well is because I just noticed the ORC input of 780,000 or whatever is pretty much all spent, and you've got a year to go. So has it been itemised how are we going to get through the last year?
We're in that process. Yeah.
Working through that area now?
Yes.
That's quite good. And just a couple of notes from the report. 47 landowners?
Yes.
Is that the total number of landowners that are joined?
So what we did, we went through a process where we looked at the catchment and identified landowners who have either a section of river or smaller stream or a wetland or some erosion features or more severe likelihood or risk of erosion. And then we approached those landowners. Yeah, so there are approximately 50 of those properties identified, and we've visited almost all of them, and yeah, many of them have.
I assume there's a greater community of interest, like what Kevin was saying, like there's people, so if you're having your awards night, like the adjoining the ones that aren't directly in line, I assume you've got a greater community of interest coming through.
Yeah, well, I feel like we've just about met everyone that lives there. A lot of the catchment is in forestry, so 50% of the catchment land area is in the forestry. But the lower catchment, yeah, I think we've pretty much met everyone and talked them through it. And most people are open to it and willing to have a discussion at the very least.
Yeah. And it's really good that you're working on a catchment space, and it's really good that also you've got forestry management plans and working with the forestry around sediment traps and stuff. So I think that's really awesome as well. You're doing the whole catchment approach. But no, that was just there's a few questions. I just noticed probably where to next. Elliot's question, I understand there's some funding around nature-based solutions, maybe trialled in that area.
That's a separate project.
Yeah.
So that's another project funded by MFE, and they're just looking at the catchment and doing a modelling exercise to see if different types of nature-based solutions have a positive effect on flooding and flooding risk. So once those models have been completed, a report will be produced to say that will indicate the effectiveness of nature-based solutions.
Well, so will that project be going concurrently next year?
It's running right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The modeling's being developed, and they'll run different nature-based solutions scenarios in that model. Yeah.
And does ORC have co-funding involved in that one?
No, it's fully funded.
Just through Mel's time.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That seems like the project's coming, it's been a while getting going, it looks like it's coming together and it takes time to make relationships, so it's really good. Thank you.
Cool, Lloyd, would you consider moving the recommendations?
I think there's more to come, isn't there?
Yeah, sorry, there's another part to this paper, which is about leg recycling.
Okay. We'll try it now. Okay, let's move to leg recycling. Thank you very much.
So we've got some, Sarah's online to talk to and answer any questions about leg recycling. We also have staff from LINZ here. I think it's Tracy and Julie, but they might correct me if I'm wrong. And they're here to answer any questions because there is a part in there around funding that may need to have some questions. But yeah, let's just open for questions on leg recycling site lead.
That is page 448, is it? Yeah. Yeah, okay. Any questions, anybody? We take it as read. Michael?
Who am I talking to? Am I talking to you about this? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry. First of all, we're making fantastic progress on Lake Monica. So this is something that is Lynn's listening to me now too.
Yeah. Yes.
And I just want to thank Lynn's on that. If you have a look at the note of it on page 4449, we've eradicated completely lagricide from 2/3 of the lake. And we're about to start, I assume, I'm asking this of Lynn's, eradicate also from the other third, that's the bottom third. Yes, have I got that right?
Lynn's, can you answer that?
Kia ora, that's right, Councillor Laws. We're currently looking at progressive containment in that southern third of the lake.
Okay, so does progressive containment means your ultimate aim is eradication?
Ultimately, our aim for that lake is to progressively remove lagriciphon from the lake. So yes, ultimately that would be our goal.
Eradication.
Yes.
Good. Okay, once you've done that, okay, but what's the timeline on that, please?
There is no timeline on that. It really is dependent on resourcing and funding. So that is our goal for the lake under the 10-year management plan. We're currently reviewing that plan again at the moment, but it will come down to resourcing. And while we're making good gains, it's taken 20 years to get to this point. So I wouldn't put a time frame on that, but that is our goal for the lake.
Okay, that doesn't really answer my question though, because the question that would then come and flow next is an obvious one. How much resourcing do you need to achieve the particular goal of eradication?
I know this one's been asked before, and these are older figures, but there was a very preliminary study done a couple of years ago that showed that we would need around 18 million to eradicate lagriciphon from the lake, and that wouldn't include ongoing maintenance and that monitoring to ensure that it stayed that way. I guess at the moment we're focused on being able to maintain the gains that we've made in that lake. We have made significant progress in being able to keep that lagriciphon out of the northern section and to progressively remove it down so that it's not impacting those lake users and not impacting the ecology in that lake as well.
Meanwhile, my constituents in Lake Dunstan and the surrounds of Bendigo and Pisa Moorings, etc., are grossly inconvenienced by having lagriciphon at plague levels surrounding them. You spray, you've just recently sprayed as well, around the major recreational areas. I think there's about 14 or 15. It seems, okay, what's the cost of your spraying each year? Your spraying project at Lake Dunstan?
We don't have the total cost of the spraying itself, but the total budget for this year was around 170,000, and that includes contributions from ORC and Lake Dunstan. It does include spraying and also hand cutting at those high risk sites like boat ramps and the like.
Okay, so I guess you're putting bids in for funding for the budget. Well, you'll soon know it by, I guess, the end of this month. Have you received any indication that your funding from central government end will remain the same or thereabouts?
No, we haven't received any indication at this moment. In fact, what we do know is that our budget is likely to be reduced quite significantly for all of the Otago lakes. So we, with the end of the Jobs for Nature funding for LINZ, what that's meant is that Jobs for Nature funding has allowed us to extend our biosecurity programs in other areas. So it's meant that we've been able to soak up some of those extra costs in terms of inflation around the materials, the resourcing, the divers, and we're not going to be able to do that going forward. So what we do know is that there will be a reduction, not an increase at this stage, and we're not aware of any budget bids that we can put in for at the moment.
So when you do your next 10-year plan, I think it's due, gosh, very soon, isn't it? I think it was expiring in 2023, actually, wasn't it, the first one?
So we're currently under consultation for the Lake Wanaka 10-year plan, but we are planning on updating Lake Dunstan and Lake Whakatipu next financial year, so that all three of the Otago lakes will be done together, and we'll take an interconnected and systematic approach to how those plans are speaking to each other.
Okay, but at the end of the day, there's really no hope for Lake Dunstan, is there? I mean, apart from doing spraying, which would appear to have a budgetary question mark around about it, we are still going to have an infected and infested lake, yeah?
Absolutely, at this rate, Councillor Laws, there is no means for us to control the weed in all of the areas of Lake Dunstan. Lake Dunstan is completely saturated. The weed is where it's going to be, so it's not going to get any worse. But without a lot more funding in that lake, there is nothing that we can do. And even if we did put more funding into that lake, all we would be able to do is keep those weed levels at lower levels in the areas where there is a lot of recreational use. But at the moment, we are targeted on those high impacted areas. We're focused on the areas where there is a lot of high recreational use or where there is hygiene issues, such as around the boat ramp. So at the moment, our primary concern in that lake is to ensure that the weed is contained in the lake and it's not spreading to other areas.
Okay.
And one final question. You're getting pushback from environmental groups or individuals, more likely, on the use of chemical spray to control the Lake Recife and Lake Dunstan and other areas. You use currently, is it Dicot, I think, from memory, for that?
That's right.
Are you looking for substitutes, or are you continuing to say Dicot is the most effective tool that you have available?
Well, Dicot absolutely remains the most effective tool that we've got and the most cost-effective one. There is very few tools that we could use on Lake Recife at the current stage. We're working with NIWA. We still have that partnership where they, every year or every time there's a new tool, we're evaluating it, looking at all of our options. But in Lake Dunstan, we're currently not using a lot of spray, actually. We actually use a lot of divers in the water that are actually hand-cutting the weed around the boat ramps. So at this stage, we're finding that to be quite reliable because we know that when the divers are in the water, that weed is cleared. With Dicot, it does come down to weed condition a bit. So if any of the weed's dirty, we might not have a good hit. So at this stage, it is a little bit more costly at the moment to use those divers, but we know that we're going to get a good result. So at the moment, there is not a lot of herbicide used in Dunstan.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see in your report that it says it is proposed that ORC fund the total cost of surveillance work, et cetera, and the various numbers thrown around. How have those conversations gone with the ORC?
That's this one, Julie.
Yep, sure. So if you've read the paper, we do outline how LINZ has picked up some of the surveillance work with the Jobs for Nature funding that we've had. Previously, the ORC did fund the surveillance work undertaken in the northern part of the eradication zone in Lake Wanaka, but there is no allocated funding from the ORC, although LINZ is still doing that really important surveillance work at high-risk sites and also hand weeding when any plants are found. We are having conversations with ORC on how that looks going forward, because we do know that we're not going to be able to continue to do that ongoing surveillance next financial year. And we have also made a submission on the long-term plan.
Well, I mean, it's a huge step up from our current contribution of 50 grand to ask for 125.
They've been doing it already. They've been doing it already. They took it away.
Any other questions, anybody? Question?
Alright, I was just going to specifically ask what the benefits we would see from the increased surveillance.
Cool. Thank you.
Good. I think just a couple of points there, that 125K that's written in that appendix, that's just for high-risk sites up in Wanaka. That doesn't include the surveillance that would be required in Whakatipu as well. So there's about another 50K, was it Julie, in there? Now, the benefits of that surveillance is what we've been achieving already. So currently, LINZ has been covering that, and that is that we're able to react as soon as we actually find a plant. So it's really important, especially when we're looking at those top end of Wanaka and Whakatipu, where exclusion is our key goal. So we want to make sure that we're finding all of those plants, because the risk is that if we don't find those plants in a timely manner where they can be hand weeded, we go back to a very expensive exercise to try and remove the weed from that area. In a place like Whakatipu, for example, without that surveillance, there is large areas, particularly in that Frankton Arm, which is surveyed, is it twice a year? Three times a year, just because we recognise the importance. That Frankton Arm in Whakatipu, as an example, is perfect habitat for lagrosiphon. It is shallow, the lagrosiphon would be able to grow right across the bay, and we've seen what it does in Lake Dunstan. We're very close, without surveillance, to being able to have that entire Frankton Arm full of weed if we did not carry out the surveillance program.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm hoping this will be our last question. Actually, it's 10 to 12.
Thank you. Question for Lynn's staff. It's a hypothetical one. If we were a hearings panel reviewing the pest management regional plan, what message would you be giving us? Would it be any different than you've spoken about the progressive containment provisions in the plan? Would there be any other messages that you'd be giving us if we were reviewing the pest management plan?
Would probably just be highlighting the importance of having a plan and having all of the agencies involved and playing a part in this, because it is an ongoing problem. Like Michael has pointed, Councillor Lewis has pointed out, there are areas, this is a systematic approach that we're taking. We can't actually do a lot in Lake Dunstan without having controlled weed in Lake Wanaka and be looking at the other sources such as Whakatipu. It's in Kaurau River there, right at the tip of that. So we're looking at those two areas as particular of high importance. To be able to control them is going to be key to being able to do anything else in the region. The other key thing that I just asked you to note from that plan is that it's not just these lakes that are at risk of further degradation. There's a lot of lakes in the region that you would have seen in that surveillance plan too from Otago Regional Council that don't have lagrosiphon. It's key that we keep the weed out of there, and more so than that, it's not just lagrosiphon. So in the South Island, we're lucky that we're only talking about lagrosiphon. We'd have a completely different conversation if we were talking about hornwort, for example, which is New Zealand's worst submerged weed. It's widespread right through the North Island, particularly through the Waikato River system. And we've seen other invasive pests up there at the moment, as you would have heard with the gold clam. So I just couldn't express probably strong enough the importance of these programs to ensure that we're not only controlling the pests that we have within the region, but working with agencies to ensure that we've got that pathway management strategies nice and clear as well to keep pests out. Julie, have I covered everything there?
Yeah, that's a good summary. And probably just to add, like up in the Waikato region, hornwort is so prolific and so costly to control that they've actually removed it from their RPMP. So there's actually no requirement to control it, although LINZ is targeting those high-risk biosecurity sites. So that's something that we don't want to happen in this region.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to wind up discussions here. Thank you, Kate. Do we have a second, Alexa? No further discussion. We've got the recommendations, the 6 recommendations on page 188. I'll put the motion. Those for? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Let's move to, I think, Wallabies.
We will check clean and dry. I missed that paper.
Just a note, I've been the conversation across the table with Gavin. So we've got 3 papers left in they're all 3 relatively significant papers, all required as annual plan measures that we would like to get to you before the end of the financial year, but also not have them rushed. So just looking at an opportunity to fit in an additional committee meeting between now and the middle of June to take those last two papers, so we can spend an appropriate amount of time on both the operational work program for next year and the policy that we had committed to coming back that sits alongside, that talks about our response when we do have non-compliance in this pest management plan space. So I would recommend we take this next paper on wallabies and then look to conclude the meeting today and schedule an additional meeting to take those last two papers, if that's acceptable.
Do we have general agreement for that? Lots of nods. I don't see any to the contra. That's what we'll do. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. So we'll move on.
So, the Chair, you're simply laying those two papers on the table.
I was just going to find out what I need to do to make
Yes, so I'm happy to move that we lay those two papers on the table.
So that paper first. Let's do one.
I'll read the ones that he wants to lay.
So I'm happy to move the variation suggested to the agenda.
No.
Just lay those two on the table.
That won't do it.
No,
You need to say that if you lay it on the table, just
come back to it.
Then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You can do
Okay,
anything
so
you
we're
like.
going to move it to lay it on the table, those two final reports. Kevin, do we have a seconder, Gary? Mover and a second to put that motion. Those for, aye, against, carried. Thank you. So we've got a final paper of today. It's 5 to 12, Wallaby Program Update and Recommendations by Libby. Thank you. You've been busy, Libby. Endorsed by Gavin, who's also been busy. Purpose to update this committee on the Wallaby Eradication Program, provide recommendations to ensure the program is achieving the best outcomes possible for the goal of Wallaby eradication in Otago. The point I'll also make is that the current extent of Wallaby distribution and breeding populations is difficult to quantify due to the limited understanding of the effectiveness of current intervention tools and methods. The number of breeding populations is, however, thought to be extremely low based on recent surveillance results. To maintain the gains and continually progress the Wallaby from Otago, funding of 1.4 million is needed annually. The current funding proposed for the next year is 850,000. Any questions from your end, Kevin? Sorry, Libby. Any point from your before?
I was just going to say we've given you the online as well, and it was made an author of this paper. And we've got a short video that we can show, which has come from.
Oh, Gavin, I do apologise, Gavin. Gavin Eddy, yeah, project delivery specialist.
And so this video is just showing there's no sound. It'll just show the extent of wallaby populations over time. So we'll get Kylie to play that.
God, I wish we had this one, Brett.
Quite a long video.
No, but I mean, it'd be nice to get. Wow, I mean. What year are we talking?
1996 now.
1996.
Yeah.
So when you play train.
Jump the river.
Walked across the dam. But how many numbers have that?
Amazing.
Yes, but.
Cool.
I'll tell you.
So, Gavin, are you there, Gavin?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you for that. Any verbal comment?
No, I will take the paper as read, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Cool. Thank you very much. Any and no comment again from you, Libby. You're good. So, Kevin.
Right, yeah, look, I just as I'm the chair of the Otago Regional Wallaby Eradication Group.
Yeah.
So if I could just make a comment or two, but look, I think what we need to. I was just taking a lead from the chair that doesn't push his on, so I haven't been pushing one, but that's all right. If we have a look at that that video, I think it's quite a graphic. It does show from 1874 when the Studham family thought they'd bring in something into the country to have a shot at. This pest has really magnified and grown quite significantly. And then they formed the containment zone in 1996, which then there was a concerted effort to ensure that it didn't spread, but it has spread. and you'll see the latest in 2022. And if you have a look at the updates that Gavin has given us, there's wallabies now down in Flagstaff. There's been sightings all over the Hawkton Range. There's been a heck of a explosion down into this area. While the numbers are not big, the threat is quite sensational. So if you look at the size of the problem in Canterbury, which one farmer talking to us who farms at the back of Waimate and heads over to the Hacker Valley this year, he has shot 2,500. The Grampian Station, if I go back 18 months, was the last time I talked to them. In the 3 previous years, they had shot 10,000. So we are very, look, at the moment, we have not got those numbers, but we are seeing those animals come into the area. There's a Judas program at the moment where we have put a microchip and a tracking device, a GPS tracking device into wallabies, and they are moving extensively. We are, I think there's up to 42 kilometres. One had moved in one night. We're then sending in hunters to hunt. I think it's within a 1 kilometre radius of that animal to see what else is around them and to try and understand their movements and their social activities. But the spread of them is quite scary. They are devastating on the landscape. Canterbury is doing a lot of work. There's 3 zones that are there. There is the containment zone, which goes from the Waitaki River right up to the Rangitata River, some 900,000 hectares, I think it is. There's a fence being built along the up towards Tekapo, some 20 kilometres, a 1.3 metre high fencing. Wallaby, that's high enough. That's an Australian model that's being used. That should hopefully stop some of the spread. But some of the spread is actually happening while the bridges are. And talking to Dr. Palmer, there was thoughts about blocking the bridge at Aviemore, which would have been a great idea, really. And I still think is a great idea. But there's wallabies migrating across the Waitaki River alone, that going on from island to island and getting across the Waitaki River. So hopefully what's happening in the lower Waitaki now with the decimation of the feed and fixing that lower Waitaki up should decimate those islands a wee bit and stop that. But they are moving. They're not just going over bridges, they're going over the rivers at the top. So it is definitely happening. The numbers, we haven't got them. The last wallaby that we shoot here and get rid of them will be very expensive. That's a quote from Gavin, and it will be very expensive, but I think it's absolutely necessary that we maintain there. There's been some very good work being done in Canterbury with poisoning up there. They've got poisoning programs doing up to a kill rate of 98% of what's in the area. So the things are happening, but we need to continually work with them to make sure that spread is stopped. So it's a bigger problem than we realised down in this area. So 2,500 in 1 year, one farmer is shot on his property, and he's very active in doing it. So,
hey, Kevin, are you comfortable with progress, from the ORC and what's what's happening on the ground?
I certainly, and if you look at the figures, I think we've covered over 1 million hectares of land. The intel from the farmers that I'm talking with are very happy with what our teams are doing and how they're communicating.
Okay.
So that's really good. But we're simply looking at we are running this on the smell of a non-oily rag, because it'd be horrible if it was oily. So in reality, this $1.4 million that Mr. Udi and his team are saying is probably a very realistic figure, yet we're only going to have an $850,000.
Yeah, well, you need to talk to the finance.
I'll have the other chair of finance. Yeah.
Okay, I've got Gary and Kate, and then I'm hoping to wrap it up.
Thank you all. I also am on that committee with. I also am on that committee with Kevin, and the conferencey session we had in Waimate that I got to some of was really interesting. There's a couple of key points I'd like to raise. Kevin has talked about some big numbers, but they're in Canterbury. Our numbers are very little. So since 2011, 87 been killed, 41 since 2020. So I mean, multiple trips, that coverage work that's being done are not, you know, more times out of not, they are not getting a wallaby. I've got 2 points to raise. One of them is that I still firmly believe that the issue for a lot of these scattered sightings are pet releases, because they are hunters who pick up fawns, they pick up piglets, they pick up kids and goats, and they also pick up joeys. And I think, like, there was a sighting in Bannockburn on the Bannockburn Road. I didn't hear an outcome of that one. We have sightings top of the Old Man Range, very isolated, scattered places. I think they are pet releases. And so I made an offer a little while ago that I think Kevin and I sit in a very unique position as councillors, and our role as councillors, that we could be promoted as sort of points of contact for advice in a very confidential manner. I do not see people who have suddenly find they've got a pet joey that's grown up into a great big wallaby sitting on the couch are going to be ringing the ORC or ringing MPI for advice. But I think the ORC, given the effort and cost that it takes to go after a sighting, I think my offer, which was largely poo-pooed by staff when I first made it, should be back on the table, because it may prevent an awful lot of management and cost to go after a wallaby. The other question I raise is just around, at that session, I asked the DOC representative that was there for Canterbury, when a farmer to a DOC boundary sees a wallaby over the fence, can they shoot it? And the response was a very practical one, as in, yes, absolutely. They said they couldn't speak for Otago, though. And my question to staff was, have you followed up on that? Because they suggested you'd need to ask the Otago DOC staff.
I haven't followed up on that. Have you, Given?
No, we haven't followed up on that yet.
Rightio, do you want me to do it?
We can do that.
That's quite disappointing, I must say, too. So that's a comment from me. It was raised as a concern. That farmer has asked me multiple times, you know, if he's up on his high country, if he's out in his helicopter or whatever, they see it over the boundary, they could deal to it. The cost that it takes for, like, our teams, our contractors don't get there immediately. They're not hovering, waiting. It takes days for them to get back to deal with that, and they're gone. So it will be good to get that followed up.
Well, apologies to Gary, but the CE's taken that on board.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kate.
Thank you. Interesting discussion, and I absolutely value the offer made. When we were briefed on this paper, we did actually hear someone who had a pet and how it was rehomed into Canterbury, into a sanctuary, because that's all that can happen. The laws are an RS in this situation, and actually the fines, the penalties, and the process to fine anyone for holding one of these or moving one is awful. We've got a new government who I think has this on the agenda, and I think we need to be more nimble and more directive about the responses of the other legislation that goes, or regulations that go with this. And so I'm not going to go and ask to reiterate the story that we heard the other day, but the framework, am I correct in believing that the framework for, if anyone does have one of these wallabies as a pet, or the regulatory framework for someone being found to move them, is either tortuously hard to implement or a wet bus ticket perhaps?
Yes, so at the moment, because it's a national program, we have diverted any queries around pets and that kind of thing to MPI, because they're managing the national program. They are due to be releasing shortly something about holding their position on pets and commercialisation, aren't they, Gavin? I'm not sure of the date of that, but that is due to come out sometime soon. Just further to your, we were talking in our briefing the other day about Biosecurity Act review. I have followed up with the chair of the Biosecurity Working Group And he advised that due to some of the cuts that are being made at the central government level, that's unlikely to happen. But they are still looking to review the national policy direction for biosecurity. I don't have any dates around when that will happen though. So I think that it is important that from a governance level we have the support to feed back to around what the impacts of some of the MPI decisions are, especially when we have an eradication goal here in Otago. They don't have the same goal in Canterbury. So yeah, and MPI have the power to issue the permits for housing wallabies for people to go and visit. We're lucky that there are none here in Otago, and hopefully we won't get any issued here.
Maybe we need to have a rule in a game water plan that disallows it completely, because of the risk. Look, my frustration here is that I think we've got an army defending a position virtually, which is a really expensive thing to run. And it's expensive because our neighbour isn't taking a similar approach. Is that sort of correct?
No, I don't think that is correct because Environment Canterbury are working hard. They've just got a bigger issue to deal with.
But they're not eradicating them.
No, they're not their aim is progressive containment in the original pest management plan. But the national goal is to eradicate.
Okay, that's okay. Only because we're short and I'm going to be one moment. Sorry.
Point of clarity. Yeah, I just need to add to that there is, while we have an eradication zone, they have an eradication zone outside their containment area.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not, I can show you that later in fullness of time, but they have got an eradication zone plus the buffer zone that they are eradicating in as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Look, I know that this is all about wallabies, and wallabies, once you give something a name, a title, you just focus on that. What I'm hearing is deer is right up there, if not worse, in Otago now, and we've got no policy. I'm just raising it because we're not dealing with the RPMP today. We need to get our heads around how we can be much more flexible and start addressing it. 5 years for the review for that is far too long. We need to start getting into the deer as national level now. And that's not my opinion, it's that of David Norton, who's a biodiversity expert in New Zealand and has travelled widely. And I'm taking it. I had him in my ear a few weeks ago, and I think we need to be slightly more serious. It is a huge, huge problem on biodiversity in New Zealand.
Cool. I agree with Kate on that. We need to be a lot more nimble because the pests certainly are. If no further Alan. Apologies, Alan. Apologies.
That's all right. Look, sections 10 and 39 detail shortfall in funding, less than this $1.5 million a year that we're estimating is needed for future years. Is there currently any prospect of that shortfall being made up from any other sources, Richard?
I can comment on that. As far as we're aware, there's nothing coming from MPI. That's the only source at the moment that we're receiving funding from.
Okay, thank you. I also see section 42, staff recommends a national cost benefit analysis is advocated for by council. Is it useful to include that amongst our formal recommendations too?
This is, sorry, paragraph 42.
42.
Last sentence.
Yep. Just asking, is it useful to make that one of the recommendations for this paper? It's noted there.
If you don't have enough funding, Alan, to do what you're doing now, you're not going to have enough.
Well, it's saying that we're advocating for this. Okay. We're not saying that we can spend money on that.
I think that that's a decision for the council to make.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? I mean, you could, is there general will to include it, or is it taken as a given?
Well, what's the point?
The point is that.
No, but the cost benefit analysis. I mean, we've already decided we want to eradicate it in the region. So.
No, a national cost benefit.
That's MPI's job at the end of the day.
Yeah, but we've got to advocate for it by the look of it.
Well, don't we do that on a regular basis when we sit down with them? Or do we just say, oh, it's okay, just bring wallabies over here?
What are your thoughts, Alan? You could put.
Well, I suppose that is the question. The staff are recommending that. Is it useful to have the weight of including that in a formal recommendation, or is this likely to happen anyway and we don't need to worry? I'm happy to suggest in the mean adding that extra.
Okay, we'll put that in and we'll vote on it. I'll
recommendations.
second it.
Can I speak to it then? Well, no, you're making up policy on the hoof, so I am going to speak to it. If you're going to do a cost benefit analysis, that surely is going to come back to the Otago Regional Council to do. MPI's response will be, you want to do a cost benefit analysis, go for your life. You only want to do it for your own region.
No, it's a national one.
That's not, doesn't, that's not what it says.
So can I just jump in, because we're not.
No, it isn't. It says how
It's
much
not a
required in
question,
Otago.
I think.
Read
So-
your papers.
So at the moment, the staff are recommending, and it's similar to what we did for Wilding Pines, but at an Otago level, I think what the recommendation is that we undertake for Wallabies cost benefit. There is a risk, given that central government finances are incredibly tight, that any money that needs to be spent on this would come out of the funding that is available to undertake practical work on the ground. So we need to weigh that up, but I think, and I haven't had a detailed conversation, but I have caught up with Gavin when I've been over in Alex, and I know that there are continued national conversations about Wallaby programs, and we can continue to advocate for better understanding of the cost benefit at a national level in terms of where the investment for Wallaby programs goes, because there isn't, what is informing how much is going to Canterbury versus Otago versus Bay of Plenty versus whatever else. Sounds to me like it's not necessarily informed by a huge amount of data sitting in behind it. And so that's why we think this work would be useful. But we just need to continue to have that conversation, both amongst the regional councils involved in this and with MPI staff. I am just conscious of that we're already forecasting to be short next year, and we still need to wait to see what the budget outcome is and what money Otago may end up with. But if we push for this sort of thing, it might be at the expense of the work we're doing on the ground. So I would say keep up the conversations to try and advocate for better data and better information, but maybe not necessarily at the expense of the funding available at the moment.
Okay.
Look, I'm happy to leave that to the more informal processes Richard was describing. I understand that we may not have fully considered the implications.
Okay, so I think do we have a mover for the recommendation, which is note this report? Elliot, Councillor Elliot, and Councillor Allen. Any further discussion? If not, I'll put that motion, those for, aye, against, carried. Thank you very much. That's the end of today's portion of the environmental implementation.
Yeah, so just confirming, we've got two papers laying on the table. We're working with governance to find a suitable time to hold another implementation committee meeting to look at through regional pest management operational plan and the biosecurity compliance and enforcement